Khan now stood before Ryukin, his form illuminated by the divine brilliance of the domain of sacred divinity. The new realm seemed alive, its air charged with celestial energy, and the statues of gods and goddesses seemed to watch over the battlefield, their silent gazes heavy with judgment. Ryukin's transformation had reached an apocalyptic peak. His body now towered over the battlefield, standing a colossal 1 kilometer tall. He resembled the ancient and mythological deities of Japan, a living embodiment of divinity and wrath. Ryukin's new form radiated an aura that felt both sacred and terrifying, a force that defied comprehension. His skin turned a deep, glowing crimson, pulsing as if the energy within him was alive and ready to burst forth. For massive, jagged horns sprouted from his head, curving like the crown of an infernal king, while his entire face was covered with a black demonic mask. All the tattoos on his body shimmered with a golden red light, as though they channeled the very essence of his domain. Most strikingly, Ryukin now bore 4 pairs of arms, each distinct in form and purpose. The first pair retained their humanoid appearance, adorned with glowing runes that pulsed with his space force energy. The second pair, emerging from his upper back, looked almost skeletal, their hands crackling with lightning and imbued with the element of storms. The third pair radiated intense blue energy, seemingly forged of water and ice, their every movement rippling with an aura of tranquil lethality. The fourth pair, massive and clawed, carried the aura of regality but also an insatiable hunger for bloodlust. The eternal fire around him, so potent it seemed alive, coating his entire form. A fire infused with the laws of space and blood, continued to burn with untamed ferocity, even in his gigantic form. The air itself warped and trembled under the heat and intensity of his presence. Every breath Ryukin took sent waves of power rippling outward, reshaping the environment of the domain to his will. The aura surrounding him was no longer simply overwhelming. Rather, it was suffocating, carrying a weight at least 100-fold greater than before. Those nearby felt as though their very souls were being crushed under its pressure. Ryukin was now comparable to a legitimate 7th-stage saint. This feeling I get from him now, why does it feel so familiar? Wondered Khan for a moment. Wait, this is exactly similar to that I got from the linchpin of the multiverse, concluded Khan, his expression full of bewilderment. Somehow, Hero of Space in his sacred divinity form carried the same aura from the linchpin of the multiverse. The Hero of Space's companions on the other end, still processing the sheer magnitude of what they had witnessed, felt a suffocating sense of dread creep over them. The oppressive aura of Ryukin's transformed state was unlike anything they had encountered before. To them, it wasn't just power, it was the embodiment of death and inevitability. Their instincts screamed at them to flee, but they remained rooted in place, trembling as if their very souls were on the verge of being devoured. Khan was now ecstatic, while the members of the Hero of Space's party felt dread, as if death itself was staring them in the face. "This man is a genius," declared Khan with a wide smile. "How?" asked Omega. "Whatever the true extent of his domain is," Khan began, his voice resonating with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "He has somehow bypassed the restrictions that bind others to using only one divine spirit at a time when activating their domain," said Khan. "He has merged all 7 of his divine spirits, the ones he brought from his home world, and fused their powers seamlessly into this realm. He's not just summoning their abilities, but transforming them into the essence of his domain." He iterated sternly. Despite the circumstances, Khan's tone carried genuine praise, the admiration of a warrior who understood the genius required to achieve such a feat. Why is someone like him still unable to break past his limits? Khan pondered to himself, his thoughts racing as his sharp mind dissected Ryukin's abilities. His talent in assimilating his powers with his domain rivals that of Maximus. If he possessed the dimensional law divine ability, he would have surpassed me, at least a couple of years ago, iterated Khan in his mind. For a fleeting moment, Khan's expression softened, replaced by a contemplative look tinged with both envy and respect. The god of space wasn't wrong in choosing him. Khan admitted internally. But Ryuken's stagnation is his own doing. His struggles are not due to a lack of potential but the absence of an open mind. A faint smile crept onto Khan's face as he thought back to his own journey. Miyamoto-sensei, you were farsighted indeed, arranging for this encounter between us. He recalled the guidance and rigorous training he had received from his masters, Romulus and Vildred, and how their teachings had sharpened him into the force he was today. Ryuken, on the other hand, didn't have mentors like I did. Khan mused, his respect for Ryuken's self-earned strength deepening. Despite that, his raw potential is extraordinary. He's the fourth hero I've encountered from this generation, but unlike the hero of fire or the hero of life, I see a brilliance in him that makes me almost envious, thought Khan. But right when he was lost in his thoughts, warning, the host is under a massive debuff from the opponent's domain. All elemental affinities apart from fire and darkness have been reduced by 50%. All physical defense against elemental magic has been reduced by 30%. The host's world energy reserves have been reduced by 20%, alerted the system. Ah, his outstanding bastard. He doesn't even have the dimensional domain, but he somehow managed to gain such massive advantage while creating his domain. Did it come from his own training or the divine spirits he contracted? It's like he is indeed worthy of being considered a main protagonist of a novel. Praised Khan incessantly. The constant praise from Khan had a valid reason behind it. After training under Romulus and Vildred, while dying over 1,000,000 times just to raise his affinities to all elements of reality to 100%, Khan knew how hard it was to achieve that feat. So far, the only other person he had seen achieving this enormous feat was Maximus Gladius, the hero of nature. But what made Sasuke Ryuken, the hero of space, different from them was the fact that he neither had a natural affinity to all elements of reality like Maximus, and neither did he have masters like Romulus and Vildred who taught Khan. It's just like Sensei said, it's not physical but psychological chains that have stopped him. Well, let's see how I can fare against someone so powerful as him, iterated Khan. Swoosh! The very next moment, Khan himself appeared 10 kilometers away from Ryuken in this domain. These statues of deities and gods aren't just for show, right? You seem like a different being yourself, proclaimed Khan. The 1-kilometer-tall deified Ryuken looked down upon Khan/Byakuya, his expression filled with disregard for the latter's existence. I was awoken by this mere pest? A contemptuous voice resonated in the 15-kilometer radius, the origin being Ryuken himself. However, the tone and the pitch of the voice did not match that of the hero of space. We should play with him first. He forced our contractor to use all of us together. A quick death is simply too big of a waste for someone so interesting like him, said a harrowed voice, similar to that of the caw of a crow. Gore, I feel disrespected. My fire wasn't able to kill him. That's why our contractor was forced to use his ultimate form. Did you all forget what happened last time? Spoke a growling voice behind the demonic black mask. This was obviously Toranaga's voice. TCH. Don't remind me. It left such a bad taste in my mouth. I had plans to take over Ryuken's body in the previous world, but all of them were thwarted because he used this form prematurely as his last stand. The other demonic spirits must be laughing at me in our world. Spoke a feminine but creepy entity from behind the mask. He. Why worry now? Have you not realized that we are no longer constrained by the laws of our original world? Here, we do not have to face any repercussions. We can cause as much carnage as we can without holding back. He. Spoke another sadistic yet ghastly entity. Behave. Just because Ryuken is no longer in control, doesn't mean I will allow any one of you to run rampant. I shall not be part of something so disgraceful. Spoke a regal voice, with a pitch similar to an archaic beast. And finally, the seventh voice spoke in a sagacious but contemplative tone. This human is very unique. I feel so many life forms within him, but at the same time, I feel like I'm staring at an unending abyss filled with death and darkness. A female dignified voice resounded. Then I guess we all have come to a final unified conclusion. Since Ryukin is no longer in control, all we have left to do is, spoke the first voice. But in the end, it was all the 7 unified voices that made the declaration. Kill him. The 7 voices, each representing a distinct entity, declared altogether that they would kill Kon/Byakuya after revealing their discontent, as the hero of space was forced by the latter to use his domain of sacred divinity. 5 of these entities were the divine spirits, while 2 were the additional demonic spirits that Sasuke Ryukin, the hero of space, contracted in his original world and were brought along with him. His divine ability, called Soul Possession, a favorable trump card in this case, allowed him to merge with these spirits in this world without any consequences, unlike his home world, making it worthy of being selected. Just the first form of the Shutendoji alone was enough to slaughter dozens of saints all by himself, because it contained the blood magic, space force, and Toranaga's eternal fire. The only reason why it failed was because the one person he used against just minutes ago was none other than Kon, who possibly was the only one person completely impervious to those attacks in the whole world. But this form, where all the 7 spirits had merged and taken possession of Ryukin's body instead, even Kon had no idea how to overcome this situation. A bunch of ghosts declaring their intentions to kill me, as if my opinion or consent to that matter is irrelevant. So barbaric, spoke Kon nonchalantly. So what if these were some powerful entities from different worlds? He was a world disaster in the shape of a man. There's no way Kon would feel threatened by mere ghosts. I'm called Okinanushi, human child. Tell me, are you ready to face the implications of incurring our wrath? If you have any last words, it is time to utter them. Spoke the regal voice from behind the mask. Okinanushi, wasn't he the leader of the gods before Amaterasu took charge in Shintoism? Is he a divine spirit in Ryukin's home world? Wondered Kon for a moment. A god in folklore and culture on Earth was also a divine spirit in another world. This showcased how vastly all the worlds made in the image of Vantria were interconnected. Kon then looked in a certain direction and spoke in a stoic voice. Do we have time to spend a whole chapter on character introduction of these divine spirits and their powers? Or do we just get to fighting straight away? He asked skeptically. Meanwhile, a certain someone beyond the constraints of time and dimensions, who was just about to go full-on nerd mode, started sweating as Kon thwarted the plans to flex this being's knowledge and research on the gods and deities of ancient Japan. Who is he talking to? Does he have divine spirits as well? Asked Toranaga, confused. I take that silence as a no. So let's get started, said Kon, directing his gaze back to the sacred divinity. But first, let's isolate the battlefield, declared Kon and swung his left palm, directed at the hero's party and Omega. Swoosh! In a mere second, all of them were teleported 30 kilometers away from the battlefield, losing the vision of Ryukin's domain. Right then, my lord has sent us all away for your safety. Wait here patiently while he faces the hero of space. Spoke Omega/Raiden. What? No way. We have to get back in case something happens to Ryukin-sama. He told us before that if he was forced to use his domain, then there was a chance that he would lose his mind and control over his own body. We must go back, exclaimed Kagura. All the other companions, including Dasho and Kensei, nodded in agreement. However, clink, Omega took out both Raijin and Kaijin katanas, staring at them with an emotionless countenance as he firmly declared, that wasn't a request. At the same time, since you're using your best powers, allow me to introduce mine, spoke Kon, and the very next moment, blip. Now, the domain of sacred divinity was suddenly encapsulated by a pitch-black dome-like barrier that blocked everything from outside from intervening and also stopped anything from inside from leaving. Arg, what's happening? Said Okinanushi, his voice seemingly groggy. This can't be. We're being suppressed by this darkness, said the female demonic spirit. Dimensional domain activated, said Kon, and soon, all his physical stats returned to normal. While using the dimensional domain, any opponent within the 50-kilometer radius lost 50% of their physical and magical stats while raising Kon's own by 50% as well. So in a sense, Khan had negated the first of the previous debuffs placed on him by Domain of Sacred Divinity. However, his reduced affinity to elemental damage was still a matter to be concerned about. First form, Commandment of the King. The surrounding 40 kilometers within the domain were now overtaken by an intangible force without a single resistance. The first form of the dimensional domain, called the Commandment of the King, had a different function. It was no longer just a pitch-black realm void of life or a single construct. Now, it created a different world where mana and world energy were manipulated at Khan's will. Alert! All the previous elemental debuffs placed on the host have been nullified. The first form of the dimensional domain has bent the rules of nature and counterattacked the previous domain effect. Reported the system. With this, Khan negated the second debuffs placed on him, making him return to his original raw strength. "We're not done yet," spoke Khan, and soon, he created a massive 500-meter-wide sphere of pure darkness high in the sky. Shoot! Rumble! However, what happened next was this sphere expanded with the aura of darkness. Whoosh! Soon, incomparably strong gusts of wind spread apart in the 15-kilometer radius, and one after another, the massive landscape started crumbling. All the statues of gods and deities started being sucked inside by this incredible force that somehow also started sucking in their mana and world energy at the same time. "Black Sun!" declared Khan in a domineering voice as he created the black hole made from space law, gravity law, and true dimension. This skill was a gift left behind by the martial emperor during the Conclave of Heroes. Khan had no intentions to hide his most powerful forms and skills anymore, because even he knew that if he held back as usual, he could possibly die here, since he was fighting 7 divine spirits who had yet to reveal their powers as well. Last time, the martial emperor used it against Hero of Time. Now, I will use it against the Hero of Space. He spoke to himself with a determined mind. Boom! A thunderous aura arose and sent shockwaves in the nearby 40 kilometers. The ground quaked and craters formed as if a meteorite had struck and caused earthquakes. Soon, Khan's human face and claws turned to that of a wolf, and the skin and 2 horns appeared from the sides of his head, turning into that of a basilisk. Flap! Wiggle! In mere seconds, a 600-meter-long massive tail and 500-meter-wide wings of a dragon sprung out of his body. And now, Khan had become a formidable 1-kilometer-tall being who had thousands of weapons, including 500-meter-long versions Lucifer, Gungnir, Beowulf, Sigrun, and Vidar. Along with them, millions of 10-meter-long arrows, swords, spears, tridents, and daggers also spread in both the ground and the sky. Xing! A 500-meter-long version of Muramesa appeared on Khan's waist, carrying immeasurable might. Khan, in his bipedal monster form clad in samurai armor with thousands of weapons, let it be bows, swords, halberds, or all forms of weapons he could think of suspended in the air. Swing! He pointed the ancient rank katana at the equally tall Ryukin, who embodied the 7 divine spirits, and revealed the most powerful form that made him as strong as a 7th-stage saint. Apostle of War. For the first time, Khan unleashed the Apostlio of War mode by his own will, a transformation he had only previously experienced when the future Khan, the martial emperor, had taken control of his body during the Conclave of Heroes. Now, it was the Khan of this timeline, relying entirely on his own capabilities, who brought forth this cataclysmic form. The atmosphere grew eerily silent, the kind of silence that heralds a storm of unfathomable destruction. The ground trembled subtly under the sheer weight of the 2 behemoths that now dominated the battlefield. Both Khan and Ryukin, now transformed into beings reminiscent of the descendants of primordial titans, loomed over the landscape. Their colossal forms dwarfed everything around them. Even the mountains and valleys in Ryukin's domain of sacred divinity appeared insignificant, as small as chairs in comparison. Clink! In response to Khan's overwhelming apostle of war form, Ryukin extended his massive, 4 pair of arms, summoning 4 katanas, each radiating a unique, otherworldly energy. These blades weren't ordinary weapons. Rather, they were the manifestations of the divine spirits that had merged within him, their powers fused in ways that defied logic and the natural order. The first katana was a paradoxical force of nature. Its blade burned with a searing, eternal fire, yet an icy chill radiated from it, capable of freezing even the fiercest infernos. The second katana was wild and untamed. Lightning crackled violently along its edge, unpredictable and erratic, while the blade itself appeared to be crafted from the essence of ancient, enchanted wood. It hummed with the raw energy of a storm contained within the stillness of harmonious nature. The third katana exuded an eerie combination of life and death. Coated in spiraling water blades that danced around it, the weapon glowed with a flame made of blood, vivid, pulsating, and alive. It carried the haunting aura of regeneration and destruction in equal measure, as if it could give life as easily as it could take it. The fourth and final katana was the most perplexing. Its radiant aura blazed with holy light, yet the blade itself was formed from the purest essence of darkness. The duality of sacred and profane energies emanating from this weapon felt like a contradiction made manifest, its mere presence bending the laws of existence. "Who wants to go first?" echoed the stern voice of Okinanushi, the most authoritative among the divine spirits. His voice reverberated within Ryuken's massive, transformed body, a voice that carried command and calm amid the chaos. "Me! I'll take him first!" A crackling voice erupted, impatient and wild. It belonged to the spirit of lightning, a volatile being whose energy sparked violently even within their shared consciousness. "He's made of darkness. My lightning will shatter his defenses like glass." "No, I should go," interjected another voice, feminine yet sharp, carrying a sinister calmness that hinted at her malice. "Light elemental attacks are the most fitting counter. Let me purge this abomination." Her tone was coldly confident, as though the outcome was already decided. A groan of irritation followed. "Ugh! This is why I despise this form," muttered Toranaga, his deep, exasperated voice resonating through the fusion. "Sharing one's body is already a nightmare. Sharing my thoughts, powers, and even my soul with these imbeciles? It's unbearable." A sinister chuckle interrupted. "Heh! Nobody here likes this arrangement," growled the demonic spirit, his voice dripping with unhinged malice. "I feel violated every time I have to merge with you righteous hypocrites. All I crave is destruction, a little genocide to warm the soul, and speaking of souls, I miss devouring them. Back in our original world, Ryuken let me loose once, and I feasted on thousands of his enemies." His laugh was dark and twisted, each word filled with insatiable hunger. Sigh. A deep, measured sigh emanated from Okinanushi, resonating like the sigh of a weary god. "To share my body, mind, and essence with you vile and despicable creatures. This is why I loathe it when Ryuken activates his domain." He confessed, his tone filled with restrained contempt. Within Ryuken's titanic form, the internal struggle was evident. While their powers combined into a force unmatched, their discordant personalities clashed incessantly. Each spirit had its pride, desires, and grievances, yet it was forced to act as one. A melding of opposites that none of it willingly embraced. And this shared resentment wasn't limited to each other. Their collective disdain turned toward Khan, their shared adversary. He was a man who not only represented the antithesis of Ryuken's ideals but also symbolized everything they despised about being fused together in such a manner. To the spirits, Khan wasn't just an opponent. He was an insult. "We may hate this union," Okinanushi declared, his voice rising above the others, calm yet commanding. "But if it means erasing him, then we shall tolerate it. For now." Their shared disdain turned into a singular, unified intent: to annihilate Khan, the man who stood before them as both a challenge to their combined might and a reminder of their detested fusion. Within their discord, a deadly synergy began to form, an unholy alliance of divine and demonic powers aimed at one target. "Ah, come on," Khan growled, his voice booming from the snarling maw of his wolf-like head, echoing with impatience. "I don't have time for your damn chit-chat or dramatic monologues." The tension in the air crackled as his draconic wings spread wide, their shadow engulfing the battlefield in an ominous, predatory aura. His claws tightened around Muramasa, the cursed blade humming with raw, malevolent energy. The weapon seemed to respond to Khan's readiness, its edge glimmering as if hungering for battle. Khan planted his feet firmly on the ground, his towering figure brimming with coiled power. Taking a stance reminiscent of a seasoned samurai, he brought the blade up to face level. The precision and control in his movements exuded lethal intent, his posture that of a warrior preparing for the ultimate strike, swift, decisive, and fatal. Boom! Indescribably terrifying auras erupted as the sacred divinity and the apostle of war charged at each other. There were no more spectators or anyone who could intrude in this battle anymore. Bang! Clang! Khan jumped and made a vertical strike. Boom! Shockwaves erupted and the nearby 5-kilometer radius turned to smithereens as Muramasa clashed against the 4 katanas that blocked the attack. The various elements carrying in all these weapons violently clashed against each other and the fabric of reality itself shuddered. "You're strong, we'll give you that," said the sacred divinity, his voice now carrying the unified tone of all the 7 spirits. One couldn't tell whether it was a human, a demonic, a divine, or a beastly voice. The amalgamation of their minds and essence speaking every single word at the same time with all of their individual voices merged. "If you're that impressed, then give me your head," spoke Khan, whose voice had a tonal combination of a dragon, a wolf, and an archaic beast, carrying the hint of the ancient voice of an esteemed being that may have existed millions of years ago. Swipe! The apostle's dragon tail swatted the divinity's legs as he kicked the opponent right in the gut while simultaneously blocking and redirecting the katanas. Bang! The sacred divinity was shoved 3 kilometers away as the sound barrier broke from the shockwaves. These were not even those mythical rank monsters found in Vantria. These were the godly beings with complete sanity and skills of warriors. "Take this!" shouted the divinity as the blood flame of ice launched itself like a torpedo at the apostle. "Shine! Die!" shouted the apostle of war. Muramasa's crackling blade made of the lightning dragon emperor's fang launched a straight lightning strike against the blood flame. Boom! The reality shook and the nearby 10-kilometer radius reverberated after the clash of these nigh-destructive forces carrying immeasurable might. Swoosh! Dozens of replicas of the light elemental katana appeared, each carrying the strength to raise a mountain with a single hit. Shoot! The volley of these blades launched them at the apostle while another follow-up attack was already being launched by the lightning katana. Swoosh! Clang! However, before they could even reach Khan, Lucifer attacked with Dragon Strike. Then Beowulf launched itself at the projectiles while performing Rising Dragon. Vidar attacked with Mountain Splitter skill while Gungnir attacked with the Thousand Stab skill. Shatter! The light elemental blades shattered after clashing against these ginormous versions of the legendary rank weapons. Because unlike the former, they weren't some summoned skills or apparitions made of mana or world energy. They were in their purest form when Khan used the Apostle of War mode. Shing! Next, a massive beam of holy aura attacked Khan from multiple directions, as his feet were grabbed by few summoned statues of the gods and deities of Shintoism. Ka quickly used phase shift skill and his spectral body passed right through them, without being impeded as he marched to face the attack on all fronts. Bang! Tremble! The darkness barrier appeared from 5 directions and blocked most of these holy aura beams while the apostle blocked the biggest one with Muramasa. But he didn't get to cement his defenses as a net-like barrier made of crimson blood fell from above. Swoosh! But just as it was about to touch the gigantic apostle of war, his titanic body disappeared, leaving only an afterimage. Stab! The apostle had teleported right behind the sacred divinity and stabbed its back. Arg! Wailed the divinity as Khan impaled his blade in the back. A grim voice echoed from the apostle of war as he made a decisive attack. Abyssal lightning! The clash between the 2 titanic beings had begun in earnest. Their blows sent shockwaves that shook the very foundation of Ryuken's divine domain. Yet, it was clear Khan had no intention of allowing the battle to drag on. With his newfound mastery from the 4th Enlightenment in space law, he prepared to unleash a devastating counter. Abyssal lightning! Khan roared. his voice a thunderclap that reverberated through the distorted air. Boom! A blinding beam, 200 meters wide, burst forth from Khan's outstretched blade. Malevolent darkness and rampaging lightning coiled together in perfect harmony, forming a destructive force that was as beautiful as it was terrifying. The beam erupted with the speed and force of a hypersonic bullet fired from a celestial cannon. Reality itself quivered. Rupture. The fabric of Ryuken's domain splintered under the onslaught. The beam carved a path of annihilation, stretching an unfathomable 25 kilometers in a straight line. Valleys, mountains, and even the ethereal constructs of the domain disintegrated into nothingness, their existence erased by the sheer destructive might of Khan's strike. And then, the point of impact. Thud! The battlefield trembled as Ryuken's gargantuan form collapsed into two grotesque chunks of flesh. His domain of sacred divinity, a fusion of his divine spirits, was torn asunder. The upper half of his form, now reduced to two pairs of arms, fell to one side. The lower half, with legs still intact, crumbled on the other. The chest and torso, the very core of his massive, divine body, were obliterated, leaving nothing but void where his heart of power had once been. Silence. For a moment there was silence. The oppressive aura that had once filled the domain dissipated, replaced by an eerie emptiness. Dust and debris floated aimlessly in the ruined realm, the aftermath of Khan's decisive blow evident in every fractured piece of the battlefield. The onlookers, Ryuken's companions included, were frozen in shock. Although none of them could see what was happening in the two overlapping and intermingled domains, the battlefield where the sacred divinity and the apostle of war were fighting. Just the sheer tremors and shockwaves they felt from 50 kilometers away were more than enough to raise their worries. "This can't be," one of the spirits whispered, their voice trembling with disbelief. The others, even the most malevolent among them, were momentarily silenced. The sheer devastation wrought by Khan's abyssal lightning attack had left them with no words. Khan stood tall, his aposlio of war form emanating a predatory aura that seemed to grow stronger as he surveyed the battlefield. His crimson eyes flickered with a mixture of satisfaction and unwavering determination as he lowered Muramesa, the darkness blade crackling faintly with residual lightning. "TCH, was that all?" asked Khan in a grim voice, the disdain visible in his eyes. He genuinely expected more from this fight, but a single powerful move of his had eviscerated the sacred divinity, leading to his disappointment. "Now then, let's wait till he reverts to his original form." Khan's voice echoed across the devastated battlefield, his apostle form radiating an aura of calm dominance that belied the chaotic aftermath. Squirm! A grotesque movement rippled through the severed remains of Ryuken's sacred divinity. Thousands of writhing tentacles sprouted from the dismembered chunks of his massive body, snaking and latching onto the opposing halves. Despite its colossal size, the regeneration was unervingly rapid, knitting flesh and form together in a matter of seconds. In just 10 seconds, the sacred divinity stood whole once more, its crimson, horned figure fully restored as though Khan's catastrophic strike had never happened. "Bullshit! Isn't this instant regeneration?" Khan exclaimed, his disbelief evident. As someone who possessed the mythical rank Cthulhu's instant regeneration skill, he was intimately familiar with such feats. But to witness it on this scale was another matter entirely. Thud! The ground shuddered as the sacred divinity planted its massive foot, the force reverberating across the ruined battlefield. "Ermg!" groaned the enormous entity, its voice a guttural snarl. "This wretched bastard! He dares kill us?" It bellowed, a seething rage radiating from its towering form. The amalgam of divine spirits spoke with a collective voice that seemed to tear through the fabric of the air itself. "We may not be originally from this world," the sacred divinity sneered, its tone dripping with disdain. "But that doesn't mean our unique powers are rendered useless. We cannot be permanently killed by the multiple elements of reality or the laws we possess." As if to prove its point, all 8 arms regenerated to their peak condition, each hand gripping the otherworldly katanas infused with incomprehensible elemental energy. "So, You're invulnerable to space law and elements like lightning, light, water, darkness, wood, fire, and blood magic? Khan asked, his voice steady but his posture shifting into a defensive stance. He had already started analyzing the situation, his mind working at a breakneck pace to decipher this newfound revelation. If there was one thing Khan excelled at, it was adapting under pressure. "You're quite smart," the sacred divinity sneered. Its massive frame seemed to exude smugness, even behind its mask. "How does it make you feel, knowing that no matter what you try, you will never be able to truly kill us?" Khan's crimson eyes narrowed as the entity gloated shamelessly, its contemptuous tone further fueling his resolve. The revelation was troubling, to say the least. His most potent attacks, darkness, lightning, and the devastating powers granted by space law, were now ineffective. The sacred divinity's regeneration and invulnerability to elemental forces posed a monumental challenge. Obviously, Khan also couldn't use the divine weapon Amaterasu here either. That would be akin to willingly blowing up his cover, since Ryukin was most likely listening from inside this titanic form, just that he wasn't in control anymore. It would be plain stupidity, especially given how he still hadn't achieved his primary goals and the fact that he and Ryukin were on odd terms at the very moment. Even pulling him in the true dimension won't work. Just as many of his powers won't work on me, mine will yield the same result. We will be at an endless stalemate at this point. Also, my Apostle of War mode has a time limit. It's better to finish things quickly than leave it to uncertainty, thought Khan as he analyzed the situation and tried to come up with a new strategy to overturn the situation in his favor. And suddenly, Khan's lips curled into a faint, predatory smirk. "Invincible, huh?" he murmured, his voice low but brimming with quiet defiance. It wasn't the first time he had faced an opponent who claimed to be unkillable. It wouldn't be the last. There's always a way, he thought, gripping Muramasa tighter as he readied himself for what would undoubtedly be his toughest fight yet. "Let's put that claim to the test." "Awaken!" iterated the Apostle of War in a domineering tone. Swoom! Suddenly, everything on the ground turned pitch black as the entire dimensional domain and the domain of sacred divinity turned into a realm of eternal abyss. Rar! Gr! One after another, thousands and then millions of monstrous creatures arose from the ground, like shadows emerging from the cold and lifeless darkness. Khan's crimson eyes glinted with unyielding determination as he extended his arms, summoning his monster army in a flash of dark, shimmering energy. A vast horde of millions of grotesque and powerful creatures, ranging from elite to lord rank, materialized across the sky and the battlefield, each emanating a deadly aura. But to the shock of everyone watching, he didn't command them to attack Ryukin. Instead, he raised Muramasa with a chilling smirk. "I don't like using this cheat code," Khan muttered to himself, his voice tinged with exasperation. "It's not cost-effective and burns a big hole in my wallet. Now I'll have to spend billions of SSS rank monster cores to bring these guys back later." The creatures roared and screeched, seemingly unaware of their impending fate. Khan's grip on his sword tightened as he prepared to unleash an ability he had avoided using ever since arriving in Vantria. For the first time in his long and arduous journey, Khan was ready to activate this terrifying power. The Chaos Demon Bloodline effect was an ability that could transform mass slaughter into an overwhelming exponential power boost and raising his strength stats by 5 times. However, its activation came at a steep price. Khan had to personally kill thousands of enemies in rapid succession to achieve its peak potential. Previously, only Jugram, Khan's subordinate, had utilized this effect during battles. Jugram's fighting style made it ideal. His overwhelming destructive power allowed him to annihilate hordes of enemies with ease. For Khan, however, none of his past battles had required such tactics. His enemies had been singular, powerful foes, not legions of adversaries. But now, in this dire situation against Ryukin's sacred divinity, where conventional methods proved ineffective, Khan knew he needed an unconventional solution. With a single sweep of Muramasa, Khan decapitated millions of his summoned creatures by using the dimensional cut. Their bodies crumbled into glowing fragments of mana and blood essence, feeding into him as streams of dark red energy coiled around his massive form. His Apostle of War's wolf head glowed even brighter, and his draconic wings expanded as if they were absorbing the very essence of destruction and chaos. Each swing of his blade felled thousands of more of his monsters, and each death amplified the horrifying aura surrounding him. As the horde dwindled, Khan's power surged. His once overwhelming aura grew even more potent, evolving into a storm of pure chaos energy. A crimson-red light enveloped him, pulsating with an otherworldly resonance. The overwhelming force shattered the remaining fragments of Ryuken's domain within a 10-kilometer radius. Finally, as the last of his monsters fell, Khan straightened, his form now glowing with a malevolent brilliance. He clenched his fists, feeling the raw strength coursing through him. For the first time, Khan's aura matched that of a peak 7th stage saint, a level of power that could shake the heavens and earth alike. And finally, Khan's entire body made of pure darkness had turned into blood red, changing his aura of lifeless darkness into merciless bloodlust. His voice boomed across the battlefield, commanding attention as it resonated with the weight of his newfound strength. Behold the true power of chaos. Khan's declaration was both a warning and a promise, his crimson wolf head snarling as his draconic wings flared with chaotic energy. The onlookers, including Ryuken's companions and even the spirits within his sacred divinity form, felt a chilling dread wash over them. This wasn't just Khan adapting. This was Khan transcending. The hero of space had forced him into a corner, and now, in response, he had become a monster in both form and power. Now, Khan let go of his previously used battle style, which was enough to win a war against dozens of saints all by himself. The Apostle of War form created by the martial emperor was the peak of his capabilities in every form. Even the black sun, which still sucked in all the mana and the world energy, still hovered in the middle of the sky, keeping the domain of sacred divinity at bay and forcing the latter to directly fight him physically. But unfortunately for Khan, the hero of space was no joke either. Although Khan completely overpowered him in the first round, and also almost killed the divine form in the second round, the fact that the sacred divinity could not be permanently killed by the elemental affinities possessed by the spirits that Ryuken brought from his home world completely changed the situation. Sure, he could kill the opponent like he did a few minutes ago, but in the end, the titanic form would regain its form again and again. Carrying the same strategy would only waste time and energy. Khan had the cosmic ether enough to sustain him for years, but the Apostle of War had a 15-minute time limit. Good thing that I spared time during my training under Musashi-sensei to cover my flaws. Although I'm nowhere close to Jugram in using the blood magic, we do share the true demon bloodline effect, the chaos element and all the powers and skills that come with them. Spoke Khan to himself. Kid, how about you use that now, the final form I mean. I do not sense it from our opponent here, said Rathnar in a calm tone. Ha ha ha, you're right. Undermining your opponent is a sin during battle. So I'll use it in this fight, replied Khan. Boom! It had already been 3 minutes since the new round started and Khan had hit a wall. Because it didn't matter if he could use a variety of his powers and even a different element like the metal or wind element. The opponent was not a being that could be defeated just with those. Soon, Khan's Apostle of War form turned completely blood red and was now infused with the chaos element. The chaos element isn't just blood or death. It's the literal mayhem caused during the genocide. As everyone dies, their anguish, their helplessness, and their final moment of peril gets manifested into an intangible element of reality, which later feeds the chaos. Sadly, only those who are either born with it or attained it by themselves by surrendering to madness can see and utilize the chaos element. The true demons or the demunkins aren't the only ones in this world who could wield the power of chaos. Since I can't defeat you with what makes you unique, I shall use what is exactly opposite of everything that makes you special, declared Khan. But instead of exuding an even more terrifying aura or increasing his already enormous size, all the other bloodline effects and his Apostle of War mode started being undone. Not only Khan's size started diminishing at a rapid pace, but also his appearance started changing. Rumble. Strong gusts of wind whirled as a massive pillar of crimson-red aura erupted and a demonic being was finally revealed. We're born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood. A harrowing and terrifying voice echoed as Khan used his new power. The surrounding 10-kilometer radius reverberated from his peer pressure alone. Khan transformed into a 3-meter-tall humanoid being with the head and horns of a demon. His new and final form he achieved by training the Chaos Demon bloodline in the past 3 months had finally revealed itself. Khan's entire body had the red glowing aura of indescribable horrifying aura as he reached the peak of his transformation. His arms and shoulders grew dozens of protruding horns and a belt with skulls appeared on his waist. The pristine white and waist-length hair fluttered with his chaotic aura as the demonic face revealed his insurmountable murderous aura. "The Crimson Azura," said Khan. Even Muramesa, the usually black and blue blade made of darkness and lightning, now transformed into a blood-red blade and exuded mist made of chaos element. Whoosh! Khan's image flicked and in just a moment, he appeared behind the sacred divinity. Slash! But before the divine form could even turn its head, thud! Rumble! It was slashed into 2 halves from head to below. Khan bisected the 1-kilometer sacred divinity with a single swing, without even the enemy being able to see his movement. So that's how it feels. The rage, the madness, and the thirst for blood. Spoke Khan as he looked at Muramesa, the blade now weeping blood. But just like before, the sacred divinity quickly regenerated. Slash! This time, the Crimson Azura severed the head just by swinging the katana as a massive and sharp blade made of the chaos element passed through the titanic figure. Again, the opponent regenerated, returning to its original state, unharmed. Boom! This time, it was Khan's bare fist that punched a 200-meter-wide hole in the divinity's chest, pulverizing everything including its heart. As moments passed, the Crimson Azura started tearing apart the sacred divinity from limb to limb. How is he getting past all of our physical and magical defenses just with his raw strength? Since when the chaos element could break apart even the space law and half a dozen other elements of reality so effortlessly? Wondered the sacred divinity, completely stunned. What they didn't know was true demon bloodline also had the Marauder Emperor skill, which basically allowed you to bypass 80% of physical defenses when attacking an opponent. However, this new Crimson Azura form also bypassed all magical and elemental defenses because Khan was now using the chaos element in its purest form for the first time. Previously, his Azura mode could not achieve this feat because it was a combination of multiple bloodlines and the unique physical powers, skills, and effects that came with them. It was the best combination of what was in the arsenal. However, just like the Dragon, Basilisk, and Fenrir bloodline had their perks, Chaos Demon bloodline had its own specialty. Now, why was Khan being so brazen and ardent in relentlessly attacking the opponent? The answer was simple: fear. Chaos element and the true demon bloodline were perfectly complementary to each other for a reason. Their robust and explosive nature while gaining temporary strength only uplifted and enhanced each other furthermore. Hence, being as violent as you could was the way to go. 10 minutes later, the mutilation of the sacred divinity carried on for another 10 minutes. The pea-sized Crimson Azura was teleporting and attacking the titanic sacred divinity with glowing red Muramesa and his bare fist, causing damage that shouldn't be possible as per common sense. "What's happening?" exclaimed the unified spirits within the humongous body. But the sacred divinity suddenly came to realize something. However, this time the body's regeneration had turned incredibly slow. "It's no longer working, is it? Your elemental powers and your regenerative abilities. Don't worry. Soon, your heart and brain will stop functioning too," declared the Crimson Azura in a majestic and domineering voice. Thud. This time, the sacred divinity could not even get up from the ground. Its nervous system stopped reacting to its commands, the body stopped healing, and the world energy went erratic as the titanic being could not even summon a small fireball. And because of this severed connection to their powers, all the katanas also disappeared. Death and fear were the only 2 emotions felt by the divine spirits. They didn't know that Khan hit them with all those physical punches that also carried the venom acid. This was a unique ability used by Rudra. Khan usually didn't use this skill because he didn't even need to touch his enemies most of the time. However, as he adapted to a new hit-and-run battle style where he would teleport to the enemy's blind spots, chop them off, and then use his punches to pass on the venom into the opponent's body, the results were finally visible. Because not only was he breaking the sacred divinity by using the chaos element from inside, but he was also using Rudra's mythical rank venom that could even melt down mountains and legendary rank monsters. And with his new Crimson Azura form, Khan had defeated the sacred divinity, exhibiting the power of chaos. As the battle concluded, it became clear that Khan/Byakuya had won this bet. And the victor of this battle only spared a despondent glance at the defeated enemy, almost as if pitying them. "No, we can't lose. Use it. Use the ultimate weapon," shouted the sacred divinity, scared of its current state. Rumble. Crack. The sacred divinity made a last-ditch effort, creating a 100-meter-wide violet-colored crack in space, and tried to summon something from a different dimension that even Khan couldn't sense before. Divine weapon, Yamada no O. Boom. Crack. Rumble. However, before the summoning could even complete, shatter. The wormhole summoning the hero of space's divine weapon suddenly shattered, only leaving a 5-meter-long small void crack behind. "Hiss, you insects dare summon us? Hiss, our contractor is not even in control of his own body, and yet you have the audacity to use our power? Hiss, know your place, you damn filths!" Cursed the divine weapon from beyond the rift, its powers and appearance unknown. However, the furious tone perfectly relayed its wrathful nature. The voice of the divine weapon then redirected its discontent. "Sasakai Ryukin, if you can't even control these parasites who dared to commit such transgression, then we shall acknowledge you no longer. Hiss, the next time such disrespect occurs, forget the demon god. It shall be us who will devour your soul from within." Hiss, spoke the divine weapon from the violet rift beyond realms. Shatter. The rift finally shattered and disappeared from existence, leaving no trace behind. This scenario took place so fast that nobody even had time to digest the gravity of the situation. "Ah, fuck." And just right then, whoosh, Khan's Crimson Azura mode finally ended, making him return to his original Masamune Byakuya persona. 15 minutes had passed since the battle began, and now it was already just a few minutes away from the finale. But the sacred divinity suddenly tried to do something that even Khan knew would backfire. He himself owned a divine weapon called Amaterasu, so he was fully aware of the condition that the divine weapon can only be used by the true contractor, aka the chosen hero/heroine of the god/goddess. They would never yield their control to anyone else under any circumstances. And because of this forced last-ditch effort, all the remaining strength and world energy was completely spent. However, the fact remains that Khan has bested the hero of space, even though he didn't get to see Ryukin's remaining divine abilities or even the divine weapon for now. "No, this is unacceptable. How can we, the most divine existences of our world, be defeated by a mere human?" shouted the sacred divinity loudly. The fact that they were collectively bested by an insignificant being in their eyes was unfathomable and incomprehensible to them, because this was the very first time they tasted defeat ever since Ryukin was summoned in Vantria by the god of space. Prior to this match, he was forced to assume the form of sacred divinity twice. One time when facing a legendary rank monster out of pure necessity, and the previous one where he faced a mythical rank monster, and that too because he had no choice, lest the delay in killing that monster would have resulted in thousands of innocents dying. It was then that Ryukin chose to infuse the 7 spirits into his domain and created the domain of sacred divinity, a power he would use only out of absolute necessity. The very fact that they were undefeatable even by a mythical rank monster that was many ranks above them had become a monumental victory, signifying their pride. Thus, this defeat they faced at the hands of Masamune Byakuya felt like a nightmare that they couldn't accept as reality, hoping that they'd wake up in a few minutes and realize that all of this never happened. "Do you know why you've lost?" asked Khan/Byakuya. "Because you're unified only in mind and body, not in a shared goal or a determination. You may walk the same path together, but if your intentions differ from each other at every step, the ending results for each of you will be different," he declared in a firm tone. Maybe that was why the fight felt like a mere skirmish. They only have overwhelmingly raw power. But there was no form, no technique, and no viable strategy. Unlike Ryukin, they're not seasoned warrior, just powerful beings who rely on their explosive abilities. Even those katanas manifested from their unique powers felt like a gimmick too. For the weak and inexperienced, they would look unparalleled in every sense. But to veterans of war and skilled warriors like me, the flaws would be visible from the very beginning. Khan then spoke in a domineering tone, his words filled with discontent and scrutiny as he addressed the sacred divinity. "You're holding him back," he spoke in an admonishing tone. Swoosh! Shing! But before the sacred divinity could reply, the domain diffused on its own, turning into mere smoke as there wasn't any world energy left to sustain it. The massive titanic form of the sacred divinity dwindled in front of naked eyes, and at the destroyed battlefield, the hero of space, Sasuke Ryukin, emerged, his body lying on the devastated ground, riddled with wounds. Whoosh! Khan quickly teleported next to him and used his healing spells to help Ryukin. In a few moments, Ryukin completely healed, yet he lay on the ground, unmoving. "Oarida, it's over, Sasuke Ryukin," declared Khan with a cold gaze. Ryukin, on other end, stopped moving. The body was healed, but his eyes looked dispirited, devoid of hope. "Who are you?" asked Ryukin as he looked at the ever-devouring black sun in the sky, not even making direct eye contact with Khan. "Does it matter who I am?" asked Khan with an emotionless countenance. "Ha!" chuckled Ryukin. "I tried so hard and got so far. But in the end, it doesn't even matter," said Ryukin, his tone filled with destitute. "Why?" asked Khan in a similar tone. "I lost against a man who doesn't even have any divine abilities or a divine weapon. If I can't even defeat you, then how am I going to defeat the demon god when I finally face him?" said Ryukin as he questioned his own existence. At this moment, it felt as if Ryukin had lost his will to fight. No, he had lost his purpose as the hero of space. "Let's find that answer together." Instead of responding in an uninterested tone, Khan/Byakuya spoke in a quaint tone. "Look into my eye," he commended to Ryukin. Now, a surprising event took place as Khan lifted the eye patch on his left eye. Suddenly, one of Khan's hidden powers was revealed to Ryukin. The left eye Khan was hiding under the patch, now turned glowing dark blue, revealing an otherworldly aura that left the hero speechless. Khan, with his calm demeanor, softly muttered, "World creation." A completely different scenario came into sight at an unknown place as a vast mountainous region was revealed. The mountainside was a serene escape, draped in the warm hues of twilight as the sun set behind the peaks. Flutter. Red maple leaves fluttered gently from the branches, painting the air with their vibrant scarlet and gold. Each leaf danced on the crisp mountain breeze before settling softly on the ground, forming a delicate carpet along the stone pathways leading to a secluded abode nestled on the mountainside. The abode itself, a modest structure of wood and stone, stood tranquil amidst the beauty of nature. Lanterns adorned the exterior, their soft glow complementing the fading daylight. A wide veranda extended from the abode, offering a perfect vantage point for taking in the breathtaking view below. Stretching out at the mountain's foot lay an expansive stretch of lush rice fields, their neatly planted rows reflecting the amber and lavender hues of the sunset. The shimmering water in the paddies mirrored the sky, making the scene feel like a dreamscape. The gentle rustle of the rice stalks swaying in the breeze harmonized with the occasional chirp of distant crickets as farmers cut the crops with their sickles, creating a soothing symphony of nature. As the last rays of the sun kissed the horizon, the scene was imbued with a sense of peace. And outside the abode, a young boy dressed in blue and gray hakama ran after a 4-year-old little girl who adorned pink and rosy-red wakufu, traditional clothes for young Japanese girls. "Oka-san, look at Nissan, he's bullying me again," said the young girl with 2 hair buns over her head as she ran with her little legs, pacing away from a monstrous being in her eyes. Her cute dumpling-like squishy cheeks made her look so adorable, while her little strides gave her an appearance similar to a duckling. The so-called evil monster then caught up with her as a mischievous and playful grin appeared on his face. He grabbed her face and started squeezing her plump cheeks. "Wah! Let Amiji go," said the young girl, fighting with her little fists. Step. Soon, with quick steps, a woman in a red and golden kimono appeared from behind and quickly pinched the boy by the ear. "How many times do I have to tell you to not irritate your sister?" she said in an annoyed tone as she pulled the boy's ear. I'm sorry. It's just that Hina-chan's cheeks are so cute and fluffy," said the boy, still mischievous. Hina-chan with her now rosy cheeks waddled with her little steps and hid behind their mother. She then put her tongue out and taunted her brother while grabbing her mother's kimono. Ha ha ha! The maidservants following them from behind chuckled among themselves, finding this childish game between a brother and sister cute and refreshing. Over 20 meters away stood a man, watching this joyful moment while folding his hands behind his back. His countenance exuded a regal and dignified aura as the sunlight reflected from his golden robes. However, he too had a content smile as he basked in the fresh gust of wind. This was the shogun and the father of these young and vibrant children. "What do you think, will they grow well in the future?" he asked a man who stood by his side. On the side stood a tall but old man with a strong stature, his gray hair and long white beard revealing the years he spent surviving. "As a father of a rebellious son myself, I hope they grow differently, Shogun-sama," spoke an elderly man who was only a few years older than the shogun. "How many times do I have to tell you that when it's just the two of us? Call me by my name," spoke the shogun, slightly annoyed. "Ah, my apologies, Tanjiro-san," spoke the samurai clad in black and sunset gold armor. "Tadayori Dano, I want to begin Ryuken's training next year. I want you to officially accept him as your disciple," spoke the shogun in a calm and thoughtful tone. "But Tanjiro-san, he's barely 7 years old. Even I started my training when I was 9. His body hasn't grown to sustain through even basic training at this point," spoke the old and white-beard samurai. "I know, but unlike us, he may not have the luxury of time," spoke the shogun as if lamenting over a grave matter. "The daimyos are making their moves just right after the foreigners came. How come these fools don't understand that outsiders like these always come to conquer under the guise of the trade?" he questioned, his face turning disgruntled. "They're blinded by the gold these outsiders are offering. The greed they've been hiding in their hearts has shown itself recently," spoke the samurai. If only I hadn't failed to gain the last 2 divine spirits' acknowledgement. Otherwise, they'd not be so brazen to accept such bribes. I can't even wage a war against any of them based on suspicion alone. I lack both strength and justification," said the shogun with a regretful tone. "You're right. It wouldn't have happened come to this had you not failed. But you're just not the kind of man by nature. Even some of your ancestors failed in those trials," spoke old man Tadayori. "I know. But those divine spirits would only acknowledge someone far more vicious and ruthless. To them, it's a sign of power and authority. But I am of different nature. So all hope lies with Ryuken," he said with a contemplating tone. "As a father, I want him to grow up to be a kind and moral man. But my position as the shogun forces me to raise him as a battle-hardened warrior who must be feared by his subjects, whether the nobility or the commoners. Only then can he maintain a peaceful rule where the society thrives," he said. "Look at us," said Tadayori. "We used to abhor our fathers when our enemies attacked our borders while they chose not to go to war. We yearned for vengeance and blood back then. And now that we've turned old, we're trying desperately to maintain this frail peace, also that our country doesn't fall from within due to a civil war," spoke the samurai. "Sadly, it is a burden that we must pass on to our children, in hopes that they can create a better future for our people and motherland," said the shogun as a breeze fluttered his long golden robes. Soon, he called upon Ryukin, who was playing with his sister, Hinamori. "Yes, Ota-san. I'm coming," said Ryukin and energetically ran towards his father. "Look at those rice fields, it's the harvesting time before the winter comes," said the shogun as he pointed at the large expanse of rice fields where hundreds of farmers were cutting and harvesting the rice, mostly with paid laborers or their families, including young children around the same age as Ryukin. "Let me ask you something, my son," spoke the shogun in a contemplative tone. "When you take my place in the future, what kind of ruler do you want to be?" he asked with a calm and stoic tone. "Me? I want to become a big and strong ruler. I will be a leader respected by everyone but also feared by our enemies," replied the young and naive Ryukin zealously. His father let out a benign smile and spoke in a quaint tone. "I just want you to remember something when you become that big and strong ruler of this country." The shogun's face then turned towards the rice fields as he spoke in a dignified voice. "Your duty as a ruler isn't just to rule with authority or fight your enemies from outside. No nation can thrive when only the people of the upper class have their bellies full while thousands of commoners are starving." He spoke and gently placed his palm over Ryukin's head as the setting sun in the sky created dark silhouettes of the father and son. "The hard-working and diligent. It's these kinds of people you're fighting for. It's the people who have very little but choose to live respectable lives. They're the ones you have to live for," said Sasakai Tanjiro. At an early age, Ryukin's sense of duty and responsibility as the future shogun was instilled in him by his father. Blip. However, the very next moment, the scenario quickly changed to a dark midnight. But compared to the peaceful embrace of nature from before, the young Ryukin stood in a different setting. With his eyes widened and body rooted on a spot, surrounded by corpses, as he saw his entire world engulfed by raging flames. The world seemed to have stopped around Ryukin. At midnight, a sudden attack on their residence occurred after they returned to the main castle after spending a relaxing evening at the mountainside. The shogun's palace was one of the most well-defended and fortified places in the country. It had 3 layers of defense, and everyone must pass through a single big gate to enter the last region. One could not even scale the 10-meter-tall walls without being noticed. However, just half an hour ago, unknown people clad in black shinobi attires infiltrated from nowhere using the darkness of the night. Their first target was the watchtower guards, then palace workers as well as soldiers who stood on the night watch. Throw. Stab. These assassins in black used shurikens and kunai to take down everyone that came in sight, not even missing a single mark, showcasing their impeccable skills during the dark of the night, skills that were honed over the decades. But the biggest surprise was that all these actions took place in the final layer of defense while the first 2 layers of security had no idea what was happening inside. It's as if things were set into motion days ago. Emichim hummed Ryukin as he embraced the warmth of the futon he was sleeping on. Thud. Ugh. Suddenly, he heard a loud noise followed by a groan. Outside his residence, one of the samurai guards was stabbed in the throat by a kunai that appeared out of nowhere. "Intruders!" shouted the other samurai. Whoosh! But without even realizing it, a black shadow emerged from the darkness behind him, making no sound. Slash! Before the samurai could even take out his katana, his neck was slashed from behind by an assassin. These killers didn't even have an aura and neither could their heartbeat be sensed, let alone their presence be heard. Run! Help! Soon, the screams begging for help echoed around the palace. Ryukin, who slept in a different residence of his own as per their rules where the heir to the shogun was always safeguarded in a different place, quickly woke up. He slid the door open and saw the fallen guard. Swoosh! But before he could grasp the situation, a black figure emerged from the shadows nearby and a man with lifeless cold eyes stared at him. Who are you?" said Ryukin, stuttering due to surprise. "Shing." In response, the assassin took out a tanto, Japanese short sword, from the back of his waist and walked toward Ryukin. Thud. Ryukin's legs stumbled as he tried to run but fell flat on the floor. Step. But the assassin kept approaching him with the usual lifeless eyes, watching the young boy with a cold, murderous gaze. Throw. The intruder didn't waste another moment and threw the tanto, aiming at Ryuken's heart. Clang. But it was right then that a sudden wall made of stones quickly appeared between Ryuken and the assailant, deflecting the tanto. Get away from him! Boom! A burst of brown aura erupted as a tall, elderly bearded samurai, clad in black and golden armor, dashed towards Ryuken, who was now surrounded by multiple assassins. Soon, a 5-meter-tall grizzly bear adorning emerald armor and a crown on its head appeared beside this samurai. Roar! It let out an ear-deafening roar and charged at the assassins. Slash! Meanwhile, the tall samurai quickly appeared in front of one of the assassins and slashed his body from the chest, instantly cutting him apart. The bear, on the other hand, jumped and started mauling the other assailants. This bear with the emerald crown was the divine spirit of this samurai who seemed familiar to Ryuken. Tadayori-sama, muttered Ryuken, his body shaking from fear. Young lord, said the old samurai and quickly cradled the frightened Ryuken. We have to go, he said and picked up Ryuken. It was then that Ryuken saw that the old samurai, one of his father's most trusted vassals, was injured and bleeding from the left side of his stomach. The black-armored samurai didn't spare a moment and looked back at the massive bear fighting against the assassins who were using various techniques of their own. Nod. Both the bear and the samurai nodded at each other as if affirming what they had to do. Run. The old man started running away frantically, desperately trying to take away young Ryuken from the impending threat on his life. Where's father? Asked Ryuken. He's fighting in the main hall with others. This was an ambush by those traitorous daimos. He ordered me to keep you safe, said Tadayori and kept sprinting with all his might. Wait, where's Okasan? And where's Hina-chan? Asked Ryuken, baffled. However, the old samurai didn't reply, only having a contorted and regretful face. I'm sorry, I was too late. He spoke with an indigent expression. Shock. Ryuken's eyes lost their luster as his body froze with shock. No, that can't be right. We have to go back. We have to get Okasan and Hina-chan, roared Ryuken in disbelief. Huff. Experienced tales at Empire. Ryuken, who was still stunned, unable to grasp the situation about his mother and sister. No, let me go. I'm not leaving without them, said Ryuken, denying reality. Roar. A loud and pained cry resounded in the surroundings as the grizzly bear fell to the ground, its breathing turning slow as it killed the last of the assassins. Yet its expression revealed a sense of accomplishment, that it had succeeded in creating enough time for Tadayori and Ryuken to escape. On the other side of the castle, the old samurai sensed that his lifelong companion had fallen. Yet, he controlled his grief and focused on escaping. The old man kept running until they reached a moat. There was a chrysanthemum flower bed at the side. Tadayori-sama. Here! Shouted a servant who opened a door that matched the appearance of the wall, a hidden pathway for escape. Huff! Lord Tadayori stopped and let Ryuken down. He clenched his fist over the wound over his stomach that now bled profusely. I saw it myself. They're gone. I killed all those bastards myself and got injured. Those assassins came for them first and then attacked you. I'm sorry, young lord. I have failed you. I have failed my shogun. Spoke the old samurai, his face full of remorse. No one had expected such an ambush at this crucial time, at the very center of their most fortified castle. Hence their response came a bit late. However, that apology fell on deaf ears. At this moment, an image of his mother and sister flashed in his mind. His mother's kind and gentle warmth, and his 4-year-old adorable and lively sister's bright smile. That's all Ryuken could think about. That night, a part of his soul died. The light in Ryuken's eyes dimmed. The vibrant fire of determination and spirit that once burned brightly was now reduced to hollow embers. His body trembled as the words echoed in his mind. A truth too cruel to accept, too devastating to comprehend. The overwhelming shock of learning that his mother and sister, the anchors of his heart, had been killed mere minutes ago, shattered his resolve and stripped him of reason. For a moment, The world around him seemed to fade into an unfeeling void. The old samurai lifted him and took the secret passage. In a few moments, they reached the moat at the other end of the hidden escape route, where a small boat was waiting for them. Ryukin, Tadayori, and the servant quickly boarded the boat, and the servant started rowing. The young boy, however, was having trouble even breathing because of the immense shock he received. His gaze was still lost of life as they finally entered a river stream in the dark of the night. Boom! Just as they reached over a kilometer away from the castle, a massive explosion shook the surroundings, originating at the palace. Roar! Enjoy exclusive content from Empire. The towering 20-meter-tall monstrous being stood with an overwhelming presence that radiated sheer power. Its main body resembled a colossal bull, muscular and covered in bristling black fur that shimmered ominously under the fading light of dusk. Its massive back bore the imposing, feathered wings of a tengu, stretching wide. In its grip, it wielded a fearsome kakura, emanating bright blue lightning that crackled and surged with a life of its own. The weapon's energy illuminated the surrounding area, making the being's grotesque yet divine features all the more terrifying. A sudden explosion erupted in the sky above, a spectacle of color and light that resembled fireworks, yet carried the deafening force of destruction. The gigantic figure and the sudden explosion that glimmered in the sky like fireworks finally pulled Ryukin out of his daze. Father? Spoke Ryukin with bewilderment. This was his father, Sasuke Tanjiro's fused form with his 3 divine spirits. Boom! Consequently, more explosions took place from 4 different ends of the castle, as new monstrous beings also revealed their deathly aura. The Deimos, those dishonorable bastards, they're ganging up against the shogun, spoke the old samurai with clear disdain on his face and fury in his voice. At this point, half of the castle was destroyed due to these giants revealing their power. Even the servant rowing the boat knew that hundreds of people, including the palace workers, the soldiers, and many innocents who resided in the castle, must have died from these explosions alone. The shogun they served would have never unleashed his true power for the safety of his people in the castle. But the fact that he did meant only one thing, that there was no one left to protect. These invaders must have killed most of them already. Bang! The giant bull charged at the other divine spirits with its wings shooting hundreds of projectiles made of darkness. Each stride it took rose massive pillars of stone that he picked and flung back at his opponents, while the kakura in his hand summoned lightning bolts from the sky. Rumble! Soon, a dreadful fight between these titans shook the surroundings, decimating everything around the now chaotic castle. But Tadayori signaled the servant to keep rowing, following his orders from the shogun. Blip! The scenery had shifted dramatically, now revealing a serene yet somber setting far removed from the chaos of the battlefield. Nestled on a quiet mountainside, near the shore of a tranquil lake, stood a weathered wooden house. The soft rustle of the wind through the surrounding pine trees and the gentle lapping of water against the rocky shore created an almost surreal calm, a stark contrast to the horrors they had fled. Inside the modest house, Ryukin lay on the floor, his body trembling as fever racked him. His pale complexion and labored breaths betrayed the toll the recent events had taken on him. Not just physically, but mentally. His fever was no mere illness. It was the manifestation of a shattered mind, unable to process the trauma and grief that had befallen him. Beside him knelt the servant, the same man who had witnessed the devastation from the boat. With a look of quiet determination, he dipped a cloth into a bowl of warm water, wringing it out before placing it gently on Ryukin's forehead. His hands moved with care, his every motion imbued with the silent hope of bringing even the smallest comfort to the young man who had lost so much. Outside the house, an old samurai sat near the entrance, his weathered face set in a stoic expression. Though his body bore the marks of their escape, freshly patched wounds visible through the torn fabric of his robe, he gripped his katana tightly. The house itself bore the signs of abandonment. Its wooden walls were faded and slightly warped, its windows cracked and covered in dust. Yet, at this moment, it served as a sanctuary for the battered survivors, offering a brief respite from the storm that had upended their lives. Thud. Gallop. Thud. Nay. Soon, the galloping sounds of a horse resounded as a man clad in blue and yellow armor arrived. The samurai stood up and put on guard. "It's me, Tadayori Dano," spoke the new arrival and dismounted from the horse. He quickly took a bow and joined his palm and fist to greet the old man. "Kaiaraka Dano, you're alive," spoke the old man, his gloomy face finally filled with a glimmer of hope. But the samurai called Kairaku had a crestfallen face. "Is young lord safe?" asked the samurai in blue. "He is suffering from fever. Did you bring any news?" asked the tall old man. "Shake." In response, Kairaku only shook his head with resignation. "Our lord is gone." Shock. Tadayori's visage shook and his hand trembled. Ryukin, who heard this from within the house, froze with another heartbreak as tears started trickling from his eyes. 2 days later, for more samurais, all of the bannermen had finally gathered. "What about my son?" asked the old man Tadayori. The newest arrival was a middle-aged one-armed Odachi swordsman, who lost his left arm during the siege. "He fought valiantly by our lord's side, till the bitter end," spoke the middle-aged samurai. The old man Tadayori felt the earth below his feet shaking. Yet he collected himself and kept calm. The lord he served had died, and now he received information that his son, his heir, and successor to his clan had also died during the treacherous night. One after another, everything they held dear was gone. "What do we do now, Tadayori Dano?" asked one of the bannermen. All 5 of them were the loyal vassals of Sasakai Tenjiro, who would not think twice before committing seppuku now that their lord was gone. "We carry on his will," replied the old man with a serious countenance. "The evening before the siege, my lord wished for me to take young lord as my disciple. He wished for Ryukin-sama to be taught by all of us about the fields we excel in: swordsmanship, spirit cultivation, politics, warfare, and philosophy, just the way he was raised. The only difference now is that he is no longer alive to see it through," revealed the old man. "I will not blame any one of you if you choose to abandon our creed now that our lord is gone. But as his loyal vassal and his friend, I will devote the remainder of my life to see his wish come to fruition," spoke the old man. Right then, "You shame us with those words full of doubt. All of us here were nothing before our lord found us and turned us into proper samurais. If not for him, we would be just forgotten even by our clans. He saw the potential in all of us before even we believed in ourselves. We have already pledged our lives. Besides, I do not see myself dying before I plunge those traitors into the deepest pits of hell," spoke Kairaku with a resolute tone. The others also followed suit and voiced similar opinions. How ironic it is. That same evening, I did not want Ryukin-sama to go through the hard training at such a young age. I was objecting to our lord's wish. Now I would have to subject his son to those very things. He is our only hope left at redemption," said the old man Tadayori. In the evening, they performed the traditional vow ceremony. In front of the young boy, who had lost his cheerful smile and hopeful eyes, knelt 5 bannermen, swearing their allegiance to him. "Teach me everything I need to learn. From now on, there is only one reason I shall live for," spoke the boy. Ryukin gazed at his new vassals with completely lifeless eyes, detached from every emotion known to humanity as he uttered a single word: "Revenge." The 5 loyal Hatamotos, once the proud bannermen of the late shogun, now stood amidst the ruins of their former lives. The vowing ceremony they had just performed bound them to a single purpose of vengeance. Their honor and loyalty to their fallen lord demanded nothing less. Only 5 of the original 13 bannermen remained. The others had either been slain in the treacherous uprising or had bent their knees to the daimyos who now ruled with stolen power. Their once great clans had been extinguished, their troops scattered to the winds. Despite this devastation, the survivors resolved to vanish into obscurity, each assuming a new life to ensure the fruition of their plan. "I, Tadayori Shuhei, will take Ryukin-sama under my wing," declared the old samurai, his grizzled face resolute. I will mold him into a fierce warrior until the time he reaches 15, someone who can fight for himself, and for the sake of others," he proclaimed. The others nodded in agreement, their determination unwavering. "Then the rest of us will go our separate ways," said Kairaku, his tone solemn yet steady. "We must scatter across the lands, adopting lives that conceal our true nature. When the young lord is ready to learn from us, we will find a way to reunite," he affirmed in a stern tone. "No one must suspect who we are or what we once were. Disappear so thoroughly that not even a shadow remains of your past selves," spoke the one-armed Odachi swordsman. "I will become a farmer," said one of the bannermen, his voice tinged with bitter irony. "Farmers are invisible to the powerful, and their lives offer the perfect cover among the peasants." "Then I will become a merchant," said another, his dignified bearing unshaken despite his rough armor. "Through trade, I can gather intelligence and build connections. It may take years, but I will establish myself as an indispensable asset when the time comes," he proposed in a quaint voice. The 5 samurai exchanged a final glance, their unspoken bond stronger than ever. They had nothing left but each other, their honor, and the young boy they now pledged to protect and nurture. Ryukin stood a short distance away, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, casting long shadows over the desolate landscape. He said nothing, but the hardening resolve in his eyes spoke volumes. And as the sun dipped below the mountains, he clenched his fists. There were no more tears left to shed, no room for despair or agony. What remained was a boy stripped of his childhood, his heart steeled by loss and betrayal. He had no choice but to walk the path of retribution. Blip! The scenario changed repeatedly as Ryukin's journey to seek vengeance began. In the secluded mountains, Ryukin began his formal training under Tadayori Shuhei, the first of his masters. "Your next journey awaits at Empire." Shuhei had adopted the persona of a hunter, earning a modest living while secretly sharpening Ryukin's skills in swordsmanship, archery, and survival skills as they resided in the mountains. The rugged terrain became Ryukin's classroom, and the hunter's cabin, his sanctuary. Under Shuhei's guidance, Ryukin grew into a disciplined warrior, mastering the basics of combat and the art of tracking prey. His body strengthened, and his mind and senses were honed. When Ryukin turned 15, Shuhei declared his training complete and sent him forth to learn from the other Hatamotos. This marked the beginning of Ryukin's pilgrimage, traveling across the fractured lands of his once prosperous homeland. He had seen the plight of the commoners and the corruption of the samurai under the new reign. It hadn't even been 10 years after his father's demise, but the once flourishing country was now plagued with poverty and disorder. The rich became richer, indulging in the most deplorable avarice for wealth, desires, and chaos. The poor had their everything taken away from them in the name of taxes, forceful conscriptions, and the daimos claiming their belongings as the property of the state. Many people were dying from starvation every day than children were being born. Ryukin, who wandered among these masses with his many masters over the years, had developed a deep understanding of their miserable lives. Every injustice, every act of cruelty, etched itself into his soul, fueling his resolve. The years forged him into a weapon, but it was not just skill or strength that defined him. Ryukin had gained the understanding of what it truly meant to lead, not to rule over the people, but to protect and uplift them. Although his blood boiled from rage and he wanted to do nothing but rip out the heads of those traitors, he had no choice but to bide for time. "They will be expecting us," spoke Kairaku, his present master. "So what? It is inevitable anyway," replied Ryukin, his eyes full of fervor. Thwack! However, Kairaku slapped Ryukin's head instantly. "Our goal is to gain the acknowledgement of the divine spirits, not to declare a war. Follow me without making a scene, and no one will know when we entered the sacred lands of those spirits and when we left. But I can only show you the path. Gaining their acknowledgement, that's left to your character and your willpower," said Kairaku, who was now in his middle 40s. "I'm aware," And I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary," spoke Ryukin with an unwavering resolve in his eyes. Blip. Soon, the time fast-forward with Ryukin aging while training under new masters. With each journey completed, he fought and gained the acknowledgement of the 5 divine spirits. Meanwhile, he also made friends who had similar stories as him or wanted to fight the oppression. In recent years, the country also went through a civil war because the daimos wanted to expand their influence over each other and wanted to become the undisputed shogun themselves. The entire country had become nothing but a battlefield with pools of blood. Armies fighting each other, bandits attacking small villages and travelers, killing and pillaging for survival among the commoners, and even our *ping young women had become common. Ryukin and his band of brothers were itching to cause an uprising, but they had no strength, influence, money, and resources to unite the masses and arm them against the tyranny of these local lords. Along with the meddling from the foreign forces, the country was going through its worst years in its entire history. And like that, many years had passed. Blip. Now, the scene turned into that of a battlefield. It had been 25 long years since that dreadful night. The night Ryukin lost everything and was thrust into a world of suffering, survival, and relentless pursuit of vengeance. He was no longer the grieving boy who stood helplessly under the weight of tragedy. The current Ryukin was a man forged in fire, tempered by pain, and sharpened by the wisdom of time. Recently, he had forged contracts with 2 demonic spirits through unpredictable and perilous encounters, their immense power now a part of his growing arsenal. But the most significant difference was not his power. It was the army he now commanded. Over the years, with the help of his masters and the camaraderie of allies he had bonded with during his decades-long journey, Ryukin had evolved into a figure to be feared and respected. His name was whispered in both reverence and dread across the fractured lands. The boy who had once sought refuge in the shadows now stood as the leader of a revolution, a force that promised to bring a reckoning to his enemies. What had begun as a small rebellion group of desperate and scattered individuals had grown into a well-organized and disciplined army. Each soldier, whether a former peasant, disgraced samurai, or warrior wronged by the daimyos, carried a fire of vengeance in their hearts. Thud, rumble. Together, they marched under one banner, their purpose unyielding: to bring justice to those who had wronged them and to restore honor to their shattered homeland. And thanks to his enemies being at war with themselves all over these years, he also had the advantage of taking them down one by one. "I believe it's time we start our revenge," said Ryukin. Cling, clank, rustle. His words ignited a fire in the hearts of all who followed him. Cheers erupted, a deafening roar of unity and defiance against the tyrants who had ruled for too long. The people had suffered enough. This was not just a war for vengeance. It was a war for liberation, for justice, for the soul of the country itself. His masters stood tall beside him, their weapons ready and their expressions unflinching. They were no longer just mentors. They were comrades, each prepared to lay down their lives to see their oath fulfilled. His friends who shared his dream stood resolutely by his side, ready to march to their deaths if need to. The revolutionaries behind them raised their weapons in unison, the sound of steel cutting through the air a promise of what was to come. The battlefield crackled with tension, the promise of a storm that would sweep away the old and make way for the new. On the opposite side of the plains stood the army of the first daimyo he had decided to take down. As the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the land into the twilight of destiny, Ryukin unsheathed his katana as he beckoned his army of men. "This is where we hold them. This is where we fight. This is where they die." His declaration echoed in the entire battlefield, reaching even the enemy camps. "Remember this day, men," he bellowed in a kingly voice. This was it, the final chapter of a story written in blood, sweat, and tears as Ryukin's domineering voice echoed into the battlefield. "For it will be yours for all time." Ryukin led his army of revolution into battle against the forces of the first daimyo who had conspired in the murder of his father, the shogun. This was the moment he had waited 25 long years for, a moment forged in pain, loss, and unrelenting determination. The time had come to enact his revenge and reclaim the honor of his lineage. The battlefield was set, and the revolutionaries clashed with the daimyo's formidable forces under the crimson hues of dusk. Ryukin, wielding the power of his multiple divine and demonic spirits, was an unstoppable force. His blade danced like lightning, cutting through enemy generals as though they were nothing but paper before a storm. Amidst the chaos, the daimyo, witnessing the might of the rebel leader and the collapse of his army, fled the battlefield in terror. He retreated to his castle, transforming the confrontation from an open-field war into a desperate siege. Experience tales with Empire. The night grew long as the skirmish turned into an unyielding struggle, dragging on into the cold hours of dawn. Ryukin's forces, though battered, pressed forward. With their dwindling strength, they breached the barricades and cut down waves of soldiers, including archers stationed on ramparts and artillery operators who rained cannon fire upon them. The city gates finally gave way, and the rebels surged into the stronghold. However, what followed was not the triumphant victory Ryukin had envisioned. Under the shroud of darkness, a devastating miscommunication rippled through the chain of command. Some of the troops veered off course, spreading into unintended directions, where they were ambushed by well-hidden enemy units lying in wait. Others fell prey to attacks from frightened and desperate cityfolk, who mistook them for invaders to pillage their homes. The confusion and disarray within the rebel ranks turned what should have been a decisive victory into a chaotic bloodbath. The rebels did succeed in their ultimate goal. Ryukin, with his unwavering resolve, personally struck down the daimyo who had stolen everything from him. The once grand castle crumbled under the weight of the final battle, its walls collapsing amidst fire and ash. But the cost was staggering. Blip! As the first rays of sunlight broke through the thick clouds of smoke, they illuminated a city transformed into a haunting tableau of ruin. Entire districts were reduced to rubble, their once thriving streets now littered with bodies, soldiers, civilians, and rebels alike. The air was heavy with the acrid stench of smoke, blood, and despair. Ryukin stood amidst the wreckage, his blade slick with the blood of his enemies. Around him, his surviving comrades, those who had fought by his side through the years, surveyed the grim aftermath. Victory had been achieved, but it was hollow, overshadowed by the staggering loss of life. The very people they sought to liberate had suffered the most. The light of dawn painted the city in hues of orange and gold, but it brought no comfort. The rebel army's triumph was marred by the sobering truth of war. Even the noblest of causes can bring unimaginable suffering. Ryukin's heart, though hardened by years of pain and vengeance, felt the weight of every life lost, and the ashes of his enemies seemed to blend with those of his people. The number of lives lost on both sides was staggering, climbing into the thousands. But it wasn't merely the soldiers who fell on the battlefield. The death toll extended to innocent men, women, and children caught in the crossfire. This was the inescapable truth of war, a grim reality that transcended righteousness and justified causes. Even when you fought for what was just, the blood spilled often soaked the hands of those least deserving of suffering. Ryukin had ordered his army to spare civilians before the battle began, drilling into his men the principle that they were liberators, not destroyers. But the war does not heed intentions. When swords clash and fires rage, even the noblest ideals are consumed by chaos. The people within the besieged city saw Ryukin's army not as saviors but as harbingers of doom. To them, the banners of revolution were no different from the banners of oppression. For those whose family members stood among the enemy ranks, Ryukin's forces were monsters, foreign invaders come to dismantle their fragile world. No amount of planning or caution could erase the deep-rooted fear and hatred that gripped the hearts of the oppressed when their homes were under siege. Families barricaded themselves in their homes, and in their desperation, even those who once cursed the daimyo chose to take up arms against the rebels. It was a cruel paradox. The very people Ryukin sought to save viewed his revolution as the cause of their suffering. And when survival instincts overtook reason, the innocent bled and burned just the same. This was the part of war the great tales of heroic triumphs rarely spoke of. The The songs and ballads of bards glorified battles and victory, but omitted the anguished cries of children orphaned in the chaos. History books chronicled the names of heroes, kings, and conquerors, but ignored the unmarked graves of commoners, farmers, artisans, and merchants who had no part in the war but bore its brunt. No matter which side claimed victory, it was always the innocents who paid the steepest price as collateral damage. This was the immutable cost of war, a cruel ledger where even the righteous could not escape bloodied hands. After receiving the report of the casualties, Ryukin, despite his injuries and the insistence of his comrades that he rest, chose to take a solitary walk through the war-torn city. Each step he took was slow, deliberate, and heavy with dread. Step. His boots echoed through the streets, littered with debris and broken lives. A heart-wrenching wail broke the oppressive silence. "Wah! Wah!" cried a boy no older than 4, his tiny hands clutching the bloodied bodies of his parents. He shook them frantically, his innocent mind unable to grasp the finality of their deaths. "Mother! Wake up, mother!" screamed another boy, perhaps 7, his voice hoarse from hours of sobbing. His wide, terror-stricken eyes mirrored Ryukin's memories from the night his own family was slaughtered. "Grandpa! No! Don't leave me!" wept a young girl, cradling the cold, lifeless body of her grandfather, the only family she had left. Her cries pierced Ryukin's heart like the sharpest blade. Ryukin's eyes widened, his face pale with shock as he moved through the streets. Everywhere he turned, he was met with scenes of unimaginable sorrow. His people, those he had vowed to liberate, were scattered across the city tending to the wounded and comforting the survivors. Yet their efforts seemed like trying to extinguish a wildfire with a handful of water. The aftermath of the war revealed a grim tapestry of despair. Heaps of mutilated bodies, soldiers and civilians alike, were piled like discarded refuse. Their faces, frozen in expressions of pain and fear, told stories of lives that ended abruptly and mercilessly. Many of them had been armed, perhaps to defend their families, or had been caught in the confusion of battle, mistakenly struck down as enemies. Despite Ryukin's strict orders to spare civilians, the chaos of war had claimed hundreds of innocent lives within the city. Each corpse was a silent testament to the horrors unleashed when swords are drawn. Ryukin stopped, his legs refusing to carry him any further. His breathing grew ragged, and his hands trembled as the weight of his decisions and their consequences bore down on him. "I'm no savior," spoke Ryukin to himself, mired in guilt and regret. This was not the victory he had envisioned. His heavy voice mirrored the grim reality that he brought forth as he spoke. "I'm just another destroyer." Ryukin acknowledged the consequences of his crusade that started in the name of revenge and freedom of his countrymen. Yet, the first ever large-scale battle he fought led to such devastation and death. "Hold it tightly." Ryukin's gaze shifted to the left, where he saw a woman in a white and blue kimono, her hands deftly working with medicinal paste and a needle. She was crouched over an elderly woman, her hands stained with blood as she tried to sew up a deep wound in the old lady's stomach. The injury was severe, the kind that drained life swiftly. Each passing second seemed to rob the old woman of her strength, her breaths growing shallower. "Please, please save my grandma," cried a 12-year-old girl, her voice breaking as she clung to her grandmother's head, cradling it in her lap. Her tear-streaked face mirrored sheer terror and helplessness. The woman in the kimono, evidently a physician or someone with medical training, remained composed despite the frantic situation. Her hands moved swiftly, securing a towel over the wound and applying pressure in a desperate attempt to staunch the bleeding. However, "Auh!" The old woman's muffled groan was her final sound as her body went still. Her chest no longer rose and fell. "No, no, no!" the physician exclaimed, her voice cracking with despair as she checked the woman's pulse and breathing. Her ashen expression told the story before words could. The young girl froze, her small hands trembling as they clutched her grandmother's lifeless form. The shock paralyzed her. Even her sobs ceased as she stared at the unmoving figure in disbelief. The physician, refusing to accept the inevitable, began pressing the old woman's chest with frantic energy. Her hands pumped rhythmically, her voice a whispered mantra of urgency. Come on, come on. But fate had already claimed its toll. The old woman's age and the severity of her wounds left no room for miracles. Minutes stretched painfully as each effort proved futile. The physician eventually stopped, her hands falling limply to her sides. She sat back, slouching as the weight of failure pressed down on her. Her face was a portrait of defeat, the light in her eyes dimmed by the grim reality she could not alter. Find adventures on Empire. It was then she turned her head and saw him. Standing nearby was a tall man clad in black hakama, his silhouette stark against the smoke-filled ruins. His piercing gaze was fixed on them, unblinking and heavy with silent sorrow. The woman's breath hitched as recognition dawned. Her eyes widened in shock as she realized who the man was. You're him, aren't you? You're the leader of those rebels. The woman's voice, trembling with fury, cut through the air like a blade. Her body shook, her fists clenched in pure hatred as she glared at Ryukin. You did this. Behind her, the young girl's anguished cries echoed as she clung to her grandmother's lifeless body. Ak! No! The woman in the kimono stood, her blood-stained hands trembling as she pointed an accusatory finger at Ryukin. We were struggling, but at least we were alive. Do you think of yourself as some kind of hero? Do you truly believe your crusade represents us? Did you think we wanted this? Did you think we needed another war? Living was already hard enough. And now, what do we even live for? Are we just another casualty of your lofty ambitions? You damned royals? Her voice cracked with raw emotion, her words landing like blows on Ryukin's already burdened heart. Ryukin's mouth opened, but the weight of her accusations crushed his voice. Finally, he stammered, his own pain evident in his shaken tone. No, I just wanted to free these people. I was only trying to save everyone. Save us? Look around you. She gestured wildly at the destruction surrounding them. Ha! You call this saving us? This city, this graveyard, is your victory? For all I know, we need saving from people like you. The woman's laughter was bitter, laced with unfiltered scorn. Her words struck like thunder, and the world seemed to stop for Ryukin. The noise of the city, the cries of the wounded, the crackling fires, faded into a haunting silence as he stood frozen. His mind raced, each thought heavier than the last. What have I done? All I wanted was to save the people of these lands. What's the point of fighting this war if innocent lives I swore to protect, are lost in a battle they never chose? He glanced around, his eyes taking in the devastation. The crumbled walls, the smoke rising from the ruins, the bodies littered across the streets. Men, women, children, all gone, their blood soaking into the earth he had fought so desperately to reclaim. His gaze returned to the young girl still clinging to her grandmother's body, her sobs quieter now, almost as if the pain had drained her of her strength. Even his own forces had suffered greatly. While their victory was undeniable, the cost was staggering. So what if I've avenged my family? What of these people? What did they do to deserve this? They were victims of oppression, just like us. Yet here they lie, their lives claimed by my war. These are the people I fought for. And now their blood is on my hands. His fists tightened, his body trembling not from exhaustion but from a growing storm of doubt and guilt. Was my thirst for vengeance so blinding that it obscured everything else? If I've become no different from the monsters I sought to destroy, then what am I even fighting for? He asked himself. The woman in the white and blue kimono in front of Ryukin continued her tirade, her voice trembling with rage and despair. Each word pierced like a dagger, but Ryukin remained still, his mind and body frozen. The cries of the grieving child, the acrid scent of burning wood and blood, the devastation surrounding him, none of it registered anymore. His world seemed to narrow, becoming a void of guilt and anguish. Flap! It was at this moment that a figure appeared before him. a presence so vivid it made his heart skip a beat. A man in a golden, regal hakama stood tall, his form shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The air around him seemed to hum with a quiet intensity, yet no one else reacted to his arrival. Ryuken's breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened in disbelief as he mouthed the words, his voice barely a whisper. Father. The ethereal figure smiled gently. Sasuke Tanjiro, the man Ryuken had admired and longed to avenge, stood before him, just as noble and serene as Ryuken remembered. Tanjiro's voice was calm, resonating with warmth and wisdom as he spoke. Do you remember what I told you when you were a child, my son? Ryuken's trembling lips parted as his father's words from long ago resurfaced in his mind, echoing with clarity. That there are no winners in war. There is no true victory, only loss. Whether it's your side or the enemy's, innocent lives are always at stake. Just as there is good in evil, there is also evil in good. The weight of his father's wisdom struck him like a hammer. The guilt that had consumed him grew heavier, almost unbearable. His knees buckled, and for a moment, he thought he might collapse under the enormity of what he had done. In his heart, Ryuken cried out to the specter. I was so hasty, so blinded by my thirst for revenge, that I forgot why I was even fighting this war. What's the point of winning if I'm just replacing the oppressor, using the same methods, leaving the same destruction in my wake? I'm sorry, Father. I failed you. He expected anger, disappointment, perhaps even reproach. But instead, Tanjiro's expression remained kind, his voice soft and reassuring. Do not be sorry, my son. Be better. 1 year later, Sasuke Ryuken had ascended to the title of shogun, a position he neither sought for glory nor power, but accepted as a burden to lead his country toward peace and restoration. The scars of the war still lingered on the lands and its people, but Ryuken's newfound wisdom and determination guided every decision he made. After the devastating events of his first major battle, Ryuken adopted a new approach, a path where precision and strategy took precedence over brute force. Every step forward was meticulously calculated to reduce unnecessary suffering and prevent the collateral damage that had haunted his conscience. The second of the daimyos, one of the key conspirators behind his family's downfall, presented a unique challenge. Unlike the first, this daimyo commanded a formidable army and wielded immense influence among the nobility and military elite. Attacking his domain directly would lead to catastrophic losses. Hence, Ryuken waited, observing his enemy's patterns and fortifying his network of spies and informants. Months passed in painstaking patience, but finally, the opportunity arose. On the night of the daimyo's son's birthday, a grand feast was held within the opulent halls of the daimyo's castle. Nobles, military commanders, and loyalists gathered in celebration, filling the fortress with music, laughter, and indulgence. Unbeknownst to them, Ryuken's forces had already embedded themselves within the populace. His spies infiltrated the castle under the guise of servants, entertainers, and guests. The defenses were subtly dismantled from within, and key exits were quietly blocked off. But this time, Ryuken chose not to bring an army. Instead, accompanied by a select group of trusted allies, he infiltrated the castle himself, moving like shadows through the corridors. When the moment was right, Ryuken emerged from the crowd and issued a challenge to the daimyo in front of the gathered guests. His voice carried the weight of tradition and honor, leaving no room for refusal. Bound by the ancient traditions of their land, the daimyo had no choice but to accept. Refusal would mark him as a coward, unfit to lead, and would tarnish his family's name for generations. The duel began under the watchful eyes of nobles and soldiers alike. Ryuken's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the daimyo's fury, his movements calculated and precise. The battle was fierce, with both combatants displaying remarkable skill and resolve. It was a calculated move that displayed both mercy and pragmatism. And in the end, Ryuken emerged victorious. Those loyal to the daimyo who still held their honor chose to commit seppuku, ending their lives in accordance with their code. Ryuken ensured that their families were spared and treated with respect, a gesture that earned him reluctant admiration even from his enemies. With this, Ryukin set his eyes on his next target. For the third daimyo, Ryukin employed a strategy that reflected the lessons he had learned from his past battles: cunning, precision, and restraint. He avoided direct confrontation whenever possible, knowing that minimizing destruction and loss of life was just as crucial as achieving victory. This time, one of the demonic spirits under Ryukin's command played a pivotal role. The spirit possessed the ability to bewitch and manipulate the minds of others, allowing Ryukin to sow chaos and mistrust within the enemy ranks. Through carefully orchestrated misinformation and misdirection, confusion spread like wildfire among the daimyo's forces. Ryukin identified one of the daimyo's key generals as a weak link, someone susceptible to influence. Using the spirit's powers, he planted false information in the general's mind, leading him to believe that Ryukin's army had already infiltrated the city. In a panic, the general ordered the gates to be opened, inadvertently allowing Ryukin's forces to slip inside without resistance. But unlike his earlier campaigns, Ryukin chose not to attack immediately. The memory of the first battle's chaos weighed heavily on his mind, and he resolved not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Instead, he and his forces quietly took control of the castle during the night, eliminating key defenders with precision strikes. By dawn, Ryukin held the strategic stronghold of the daimyo's castle. Instead of engaging in open battle with the opposition forces scattered across the city, he fortified his position and prepared to defend it. The daimyo's forces, realizing their leader was isolated, attempted to regroup and storm the castle to reinforce their lord. Ryukin's forces, however, were well prepared. Using the castle's natural defenses, they repelled wave after wave of assaults. Ryukin's men held their ground until noon. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Ryukin ensured the safety of the servants and non-combatants, forbidding any unnecessary harm. His orders were clear. No innocent lives were to be taken, not even those of the enemy's retainers. After hours of intense fighting, the daimyo's forces, now exhausted and demoralized, finally crumbled. With their lord captured and their reinforcements unable to breach the castle walls, they had no choice but to surrender. The fourth and final daimyo, perhaps recognizing the futility of resistance, proposed a diplomatic surrender. This proposal included a request for clemency for his family and clan members, offering an olive branch in exchange for their survival. It was an ironic twist, one last act of submission from a man who had once sought power and dominance. Ryukin, having claimed the majority of the country by this point, agreed to the terms. He understood that a prolonged war would only lead to more unnecessary bloodshed and wanted to bring his crusade to a swift conclusion. A meeting was arranged at a remote mountaintop, a neutral ground for their negotiations. But Ryukin, seasoned by years of betrayal and war, knew better than to trust the daimyo's intentions completely. Anticipating treachery, he made his own preparations. While the daimyo and his forces departed for the meeting, Ryukin had already sent his allies to encircle and lay siege to the daimyo's castle, cutting off any potential escape routes. For the meeting itself, Ryukin brought only his finest warriors, loyal and battle-tested allies who could match any surprise assault. As expected, an assassination attempt unfolded shortly after the negotiations began. Hidden forces of the daimyo sprang into action, attempting to kill Ryukin and his retinue. But Ryukin had prepared meticulously for such a betrayal. Your next read is at Empire. His warriors quickly neutralized the ambushers, and the battlefield that was supposed to be a diplomatic exchange became a deadly trap for the daimyo's forces. But it was all within expectations. As expected, the daimyo had no intentions to honor his word, and his surrender was an apparent facade. However, amidst the chaos, something within Ryukin snapped. The demonic spirits that had become his reluctant allies over the years surged to the forefront of his being. One in particular, a spirit embodying unbridled wrath, took control. In this state of frenzy, Ryukin unleashed a terrifying display of power, slaughtering thousands of enemy soldiers in a single night. Friend and foe alike bore witness to the unrestrained fury of a man consumed by vengeance. his actions like a storm of blades and fire. The mountaintop ran red with blood as Ryukin rampaged through the battlefield, his humanity seemingly drowned by the rage of the spirit. But at the precipice of disaster, as his wrath began to turn indiscriminately toward even his allies, Ryukin's resolve broke through the haze. Memories of his father's words echoed in his mind. "Do not be sorry, my son. Be better." With a surge of willpower, he wrested control back from the demonic spirit, bringing an end to the massacre before it spiraled further out of control. The aftermath was sobering. Ryukin stood amidst the carnage, the weight of his actions pressing heavily upon him. Though his rage had spared his friends, the devastation was undeniable. The daimyo's forces were utterly decimated, their leader among the fallen. Ryukin's allies, though victorious, looked upon him with a mixture of awe and trepidation, as if they had seen a glimpse of something beyond human. This battle, though unplanned in its ferocity, marked the final chapter of Ryukin's vengeance. With the last of the traitorous daimyos defeated, their forces either annihilated or surrendering, Ryukin's crusade came to an end. The war that could have stretched on for decades had been concluded in a fraction of the time, though not without its scars, both on the land and on Ryukin's soul. The words of his father's apparition had shaped his journey, tempering his thirst for revenge with the wisdom of restraint. While his methods were not without flaw, Ryukin had succeeded in averting further loss of life where he could, ensuring that the battles he fought did not descend into endless cycles of violence. Now, with the traitors purged and the country unified under his banner, Ryukin stood at the precipice of a new era. He had both the strength and the legitimacy to rule as shogun, a title he had earned through fire and blood. But as he gazed upon the land he had fought so hard to liberate, he knew his true task was only just beginning. To rebuild a nation fractured by war, and to prove that his reign would bring peace, not the tyranny of the past. With Ryukin at the helm, supported by the allies he had made throughout his arduous journey, peace and order began to return to the war-torn nation. One of his first acts as shogun was to return ownership of the land to its rightful stewards, the people. Excessive taxes that had burdened generations were abolished, and replaced with fair and manageable systems designed to rebuild the economy. But Ryukin knew that restoring the nation wasn't as simple as issuing decrees from the safety of his castle. His responsibilities stretched far beyond commanding armies or eliminating traitors. The scars of war ran deep. Bandits and rogue ronin terrorized the countryside. Distrust simmered among the masses, and famine and starvation remained rampant. Rather than waiting for reports or delegating entirely to his subordinates, Ryukin embarked on another pilgrimage. This journey, however, was not a quest for strength or vengeance anymore, but a mission of peace and restoration. Harnessing the power of the divine spirits he had contracted over the years, Ryukin began to directly address the plights of his people. In regions devastated by drought, he called forth spirits of water and life to create rivers and canals, transforming barren lands into fertile fields. Villages long abandoned due to lack of sustenance saw their lands bloom again under Ryukin's guidance. In areas plagued by banditry, Ryukin personally led efforts to establish safe routes for travelers and merchants, accompanied by his most loyal warriors. The merchants, emboldened by these new pathways, began to reach remote villages, bringing with them goods, trade, and prosperity. The flow of commerce reconnected fractured communities, knitting the nation back together. Instead of confining himself to the role of a distant ruler, Ryukin worked side by side with his people. With his divine spirits, he helped peasants toil the soil, ensuring that every seed they planted bore fruit. He lent his strength to clear forests, build bridges, and pave roads, making the lives of his countrymen safer and more secure. No shogun in the history of the land had ever taken such direct and personal responsibility for the welfare of their people. Where past leaders had relied on bureaucrats and warriors to enforce their will, Ryukin walked the front lines of restoration. His actions inspired hope and loyalty among the populace, bridging the gap between ruler and ruled. In one village devastated by famine, Ryukin's presence turned despair into celebration. He used the spirit's powers to enrich the soil and summon rain. By harvest time, fields that had lain barren for years yielded an abundance of crops. The villagers called him not just their shogun but their savior. As word of his deeds spread, more and more of the population came to see Ryukin not as a warrior or conqueror but as a true shepherd of the people. The once fractured and fearful nation began to heal, its wounds stitched together by Ryukin's tireless efforts. Within half a year, the aftermath of the war had stabilized. Famine and starvation were alleviated, banditry diminished, and trust was slowly restored among the people. Communities that had once viewed each other with suspicion now worked together, united by the example set by their shogun. Ryukin had transformed not just the physical landscape of his nation but also its soul. His actions, driven by a deep sense of responsibility and empathy, solidified his legacy as a ruler unlike any other, a shogun whose true strength lay not in his sword but in his unwavering dedication to his people. One day, he stood close to a rice field, watching the people harvest the crops with sickle, along with their families. This peaceful scenario reminded him of that evening they spent at the mountaintop. Sasakai Ryukin had finally fulfilled his promise to his father. One day, Ryukin returned to his castle after completing his pilgrimage. His heart carried the weight of the countless lives he had helped and the sacrifices made along the way. But it also carried a newfound sense of peace and purpose, a feeling he had not experienced in decades. Upon his return, he swiftly took measures to ensure the stability and prosperity of the nation would endure. Over the following days, Ryukin appointed a cadre of new officials, carefully selecting those who had demonstrated loyalty, wisdom, and compassion. To further solidify the chain of command, he dispatched his trusted masters and close allies, those who had fought beside him during the war, to govern different regions of the country. Each carried the responsibility of upholding law and order, representing Ryukin's ideals in their lands. With the country finally united under his vision, Ryukin fulfilled not only his vow of vengeance for his family but also his promise to his father, to become a ruler worthy of his people's trust and love. On a tranquil night, beneath the canopy of a blooming sakura tree, Ryukin sat alone. The gentle rustling of the petals in the breeze mirrored the calm within him. Above, the moon hung bright and unblemished in the sky, its silvery light illuminating his features as he gazed upward. "Father, Mother, Hina-chan," Ryukin murmured softly, his voice carrying a mixture of longing and solace. "I hope that I've made you all proud. Please be at peace." He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, feeling the years of anguish, guilt, and hatred that had once driven his every step slowly ebb away. For the first time in over 2 decades, his heart felt light. "So here you are, Anata, darling. I've been looking for you," came a gentle, melodic voice from behind him. Ryukin turned to see a vision of beauty approaching. A woman adorned in a regal crimson kimono, her presence as captivating as the moonlight itself. Her dark, flowing hair framed a face that exuded both grace and strength. This woman was Kane, Ryukin's wife. And who was Kane? She was the same female physician that Ryukin met on the morning after his first battle. Back then, her sharp words had pierced his heart, dragging him from the precipice of despair and forcing him to confront the grim reality of his crusade. Ryukin's mission wasn't merely about vengeance. It was about peace. Kane's scathing accusations, born of heartbreak and anguish, had illuminated the path he had been too blind to see. After that day, Ryukin sought her out, determined to make her one of his personal physicians. Despite her incessant refusals and protests, he insisted, forcing her into his service against her will. Only later did Kane discover his true reasons. He didn't just need a healer. He needed a second voice of reason, someone unafraid to challenge him, to question his motives, and to speak for the people his war was meant to protect. Unlike Ryukin's close allies, who were military men, former warriors, or friends driven by vengeance, Kane was different. She had no lofty titles or backgrounds. She didn't wield a blade or command troops. She was an ordinary woman who had suffered greatly, losing her entire family to the ravages of war many years ago. Yet, Kane's path diverged from Ryuken's in a way that left an indelible mark on him. Where Ryuken was consumed by rage and vengeance, Kane chose compassion and healing. She didn't fight to destroy those who caused her pain. Instead, she fought to end suffering, dedicating her life to healing the wounded and providing solace to the grieving, just like she once suffered. It wasn't weakness that guided her choice but an unshakable resolve. Kane believed that peace couldn't be achieved only through revenge. It also had to be nurtured with understanding and care, one life at a time. Both of their definitions of peace and vengeance were starkly different. Yet it was the one factor that shaped their future. As the days went by, Ryuken found himself turning more and more to Kane for her counsel. In the stillness of strategy meetings and under the weight of his nation's future, he sought her perspective, a perspective unclouded by the thirst for vengeance or the rigidity of military tradition. Her opinions, while often starkly different from those of his masters and allies, resonated with him. Kane's suggestions challenged his beliefs, forcing him to weigh the value of human life against the necessity of victory. At first, his generals and allies bristled at her involvement, protesting that warfare was no place for a civilian voice, let alone one from a former enemy. But Ryuken had already learned the harsh lesson of his first battle. A victory drenched in unnecessary bloodshed wasn't a true victory. "It is not enough to win," Kane had told him once, her voice steady but impassioned. "How you win shapes the world you leave behind. If people fear you, they will never love you. But if they love you, they will rebuild the world with you." Her words became a cornerstone of his strategies. With Kane's advice, Ryuken devised plans that minimized casualties and ensured the people he liberated felt more hope than fear. Ryuken understood that not all means were justified in the end as long as you win. How he achieved his goals would define the kind of ruler he would become. From the second to the fourth daimyos, the battles were fought with precision and care, the loss of life kept to a minimum. Cities welcomed Ryuken not as a conqueror but as a savior. Kane's wisdom and Ryuken's newfound restraint turned his crusade from a mission of vengeance into one of redemption and restoration. Over time, Ryuken and Kane's relationship deepened. Their shared experiences, both of loss and of rebuilding, became the foundation of a bond stronger than either had anticipated. They were two broken souls who found solace in each other's company. Kane became not just a trusted confidant, but a mirror reflecting Ryuken's better self, while Ryuken became her pillar of strength in a world that had taken so much from her. Their reliance on each other grew, transcending their roles as leader and advisor. In the quiet moments after battles were won and strategies laid bare, they spoke of their fears and dreams, their pain and their hope. When Ryuken finally unified the country, bringing an end to years of conflict, he made their union official. In a modest yet heartfelt ceremony, he married Kane, declaring her not only his wife but the heart of his vision for a peaceful future. It was also Kane who urged Ryuken to lead the reformation from the front. "You are the shogun, but that title means nothing if your people cannot feel your presence. They need to see you not as a distant ruler but as one of them, walking their roads, toiling their fields, and sharing their burdens," iterated Kane sternly. Taking her words to heart, Ryuken spent months traveling across the land. With the aid of divine spirits, he irrigated barren fields, cleared pathways for trade, and brought life to drought-stricken lands. Wherever he went, he carried not just the authority of a ruler but the compassion of a man who understood the struggles of his people. This morning, Ryuken had returned to his castle, weary from his pilgrimage but fulfilled by the progress he had witnessed. As night fell, he found himself under a serene moonlit sky, seated beneath a blooming sakura tree. "I apologize, dear. I was just reminiscing about the past," Ryuken replied with a faint smile as Kane gracefully knelt beside him. Without hesitation, she leaned into his side, her warmth grounding him in the present. "Stay updated via Empire." Ryuken draped his arm around her, pulling her close. Together, they gazed at the serene beauty of the moon, its glow casting a tranquil light over the sakura blossoms falling like whispers around them. For a man who had endured unspeakable pain, borne the weight of countless lives, and waged wars to reshape a broken world. This moment was a revelation. For the first time since that fateful night 26 years ago, Sasakai Ryukin was truly happy. Months passed after Ryukin unified the country and ascended as its rightful ruler. Under his leadership, the fractured nation began its journey toward healing. The wounds of war, though deep, slowly started to mend as hope flickered back into the hearts of its people. The new administration, built on the ashes of the old regime, became a symbol of law, order, and fairness. For the first time in decades, the general population felt the presence of a ruler who not only wielded power but also held accountability to his people. Ryukin's reign was unyielding toward those who sought to disrupt the fragile peace. Bandits, thieves, and remnants of the lawless past faced swift and merciless justice. Samurai loyal to Ryukin, along with the newly appointed daimyos, upheld an unshakable standard of protection for the people. Corruption, once rampant in the old regime, was treated with zero tolerance. Whether a commoner or a noble, anyone found guilty of exploiting their position was publicly tried and hanged in the town square, a stark reminder that no one was above the law. The most radical change under Ryukin's leadership was the dismantling of the old nobility. In their place, a new class of leaders emerged, many of whom came from commoner backgrounds. These were individuals who had earned their positions through merit, loyalty, and dedication during Ryukin's uprising. For the first time in the nation's history, the barriers between the classes began to crumble. Once reserved exclusively for the elite, government positions were now accessible to anyone who demonstrated skill, knowledge, and commitment. Ryukin introduced rigorous examinations and assessments to ensure that only the most capable individuals served in positions of power. This shift toward meritocracy not only gave the people a sense of inclusion but also fostered a newfound pride in their shogun. Under Ryukin's leadership, the dream of a better future no longer seemed like a distant fantasy but a tangible reality. Even those who once thrived on chaos and lawlessness found themselves forced to adapt to the new order. The clear and unforgiving justice system left no room for exploitation, while the expanding opportunities for honest work encouraged many to abandon their old ways. Ryukin's reforms extended beyond law and governance. He invested in rebuilding infrastructure, ensuring that villages and towns devastated by war were restored. Roads were repaired, markets flourished, and trade routes reopened, connecting the once isolated parts of the country. With every passing day, Ryukin's homeland moved closer to a hopeful tomorrow. The pain of the past lingered, but under the light of a just ruler, the people began to believe in a future where peace and prosperity were not fleeting but enduring truths. Blip! The scenario had changed again. The joy and peace that had lasted for nearly a year had vanished in an instant. "I'm sorry, Anata," Kane whispered, her voice trembling as blood soaked through her golden kimono, staining her once serene figure. "Enjoy more content from Empire." One hand rested protectively over her swollen stomach, while the other clutched at Ryukin, who was kneeling beside her, his face etched with desperation. No, nothing's going to happen to you." Ryukin's voice cracked as he tried to steady her. "Don't close your eyes. You hear me, Kane?" His divine spirit swirled around them, their ethereal forms glowing with frantic energy as they poured their powers into her broken body. Yet, no matter how hard they tried, the malevolent black and red energy that radiated from her wounds repelled their efforts. Kane coughed, blood spilling from her lips as her breaths grew shallow. Her eyes, once full of life and resolve, were dimming, though they still held a quiet strength. "Anata, it's too late. I'm a physician. I know my own body. There's no saving me now." "No, I refuse to believe that," Ryukin shouted, his hands glowing with divine energy as he desperately pressed them against her wounds. Kane's trembling hand reached up to touch his face, leaving a streak of blood on his cheek. "Anata, stop. Please listen to me," she pleaded, her voice soft yet urgent. "Before I go, promise me something." Tears streamed down Ryukin's face as he shook his head, refusing to accept her words. "You're not going anywhere. Don't ask me to make promises. Just hold on, please. But Kane's voice grew steadier, though weaker with every passing moment. Promise me, you won't carry this burden alone anymore, that you'll let go of the pain and suffering you've endured for so long. Her eyes filled with tears and sadness. Her gaze dropped to her stomach, her tears falling as she choked out the words. And promise me, you'll find your own happiness. Thump. Kane's hand dropped to the ground, her eyes closed and her body lifeless. No, 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 no. Wake up. Honey, wake up, bellowed Ryukin. Kane's hand fell lifeless to the ground, her once bright eyes now closed forever. Her body, still warm moments ago, now lay cold and still in Ryukin's trembling arms. His wife and their unborn child were gone. The closest thing to happiness Ryukin had found after so many years now lay in his arm, devoid of life. No, 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 no. Wake up. Honey, wake up, bellowed Ryukin, his voice echoing through the room with raw, unfiltered despair. Tears streaked down his face as he clung to her, shaking her gently as if trying to rouse her from a deep sleep. But there was no response. Boom! Ryukin's aura erupted in an explosion, a storm of raw energy crackling with fury and anguish. The very walls of the room trembled, and the air grew heavy with an almost suffocating intensity. The divine spirits bound to him appeared, their forms trembling in resonance with their master's pain, yet powerless to change the grim reality before them. Cradling Kane's lifeless body, Ryukin turned, his grief-stricken eyes blazing with uncontainable rage. His trembling hands gently brushed a lock of her dark hair from her pale face as the events of the evening flashed through his mind like a haunting replay. His world crumbled again, in a matter of minutes. Just a few minutes earlier, the evening had been serene. Ryukin and Kane were sharing a private meal in their chambers, the servants having been dismissed for the night. It was a rare and precious moment of solitude, free from the burdens of leadership and war. Their conversation had been filled with warmth and laughter, as they discussed their hopes for their unborn child. Kane teased Ryukin about how strict he might be as a father, while Ryukin chuckled and shared his dreams of teaching their child the values of compassion and strength. If it's a boy, he'll need discipline, Ryukin had mused. But if it's a girl, she should be treated delicately. Kane had smiled, her eyes alight with mischief. Delicately? I think she'll need to be strong and stubborn, like her mother, to keep you in line. Ryukin laughed, the sound rare but genuine. For a fleeting moment, everything felt perfect. Kane reached for the water pitcher but paused, her gaze landing on Ryukin's glass instead. You don't mind if I steal this, do you? She asked playfully, taking the glass and sipping from it without waiting for his reply. He had smiled indulgently, as if I could say no to you. But the warmth of the moment was shattered in an instant. Kane's smile faltered. Her hand flew to her throat as a sharp gasp escaped her lips. The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Blood began to spill from her mouth, and her veins darkened as her lips turned an ominous blue. Kane! Ryukin shouted, rushing to her side as she collapsed. He caught her just before she hit the ground, his divine spirits appearing instantly, their energies focused on purging whatever was attacking her body. But their efforts were futile. The malevolent poison coursing through Kane resisted every attempt to heal her. It was unlike anything Ryukin had encountered, so potent that even his powers and those of the spirits were rendered ineffective. Then it dawned on him. The drink she had taken from his glass, meant for him, had been laced with the poison. A concoction so lethal that even his divine and demonic abilities couldn't neutralize it. In a cruel twist of fate, Kane had unknowingly taken his place as the victim. What was supposed to be a quiet and meaningful talk between two people who looked forward to parenthood turned into a ghastly nightmare. Ryukin stood amidst the chaos, his eyes still glistening with tears yet seething with a hatred that consumed his very being. Around him, dozens of soldiers had gathered, their faces pale with terror and confusion. Kane's lifeless body remained in his arms as the soldiers dragged forward the servant responsible for their meal. My lord! His face, "It's a mask!" one soldier shouted, his voice quaking as he ripped away the flesh-like disguise. The grotesque illusion peeled away to reveal a white man, his golden hair and blue eyes starkly out of place in their lands. His expression was cold, disdainful even, despite his capture. Ryuken's grief-stricken voice trembled as he demanded, "Who are you?" The man's lips twisted into a smirk. "You know who we are. Did you think we'd let you live peacefully after you defeated our puppets?" Spoke the man with defiant eyes. "Your journey continues at Empire." There was no sense of guilt or regret in his eyes. The man was a cold-blooded assassin. Ryuken's soldiers murmured among themselves, their confusion giving way to a dawning realization. "This land belongs to us. It's ours to rule. You just saved us the trouble of dealing with those dogs who forgot who fed them. The daimyos you defeated, mere tools for our plans. And you've done nothing but prepare the ground for our return. Your petty victories will be short-lived." The man continued, venom dripping from every word. Ryuken's aura trembled violently, his grip on Kane tightening. "You took them from me," he whispered, his voice shaking with an incomprehensible mix of sorrow and fury. "Oh, the poison? A shame. It was meant for you. But in the end, does it matter? Your death was inevitable, as is our victory," sneered the foreigner. Crackle! Before the man could utter another word, a sudden, grotesque appendage shot out from Ryuken's side. A dark, twisted arm imbued with a horrifying energy. Stab! With one swift motion, the arm crushed the man's head, silencing him instantly. The soldiers gasped as the foreigner's lifeless body crumpled to the floor. Ryuken's face, contorted with anguish, betrayed no remorse. The words of the demonic spirit echoed in his mind, seductive and relentless. Ryuken had heard enough to know which force this man belonged to. The foreigners who previously planned the fall of the shogunate by bribing the four daimyos and were later pushed out of the country due to civil war among them, had returned after half a decade just because Ryuken now unified the nation, to loot and devour it again. And their first attempt took away the only thing he held most dear. That's right, kill them. Avenge your wife and your child. There is a limit on how much can someone take from you. They conspired the fall of your family. Now they took away your lovely wife and innocent child. There is no need to show mercy. There is no need to hold back your rage," whispered the strongest one among the two demonic spirits. Ryuken's world had fallen apart once again, and his mind collapsed from the unimaginable grief and pain. And it was right then that the demonic spirit took hold over his shattered soul to the point even the other divine spirits couldn't stop it. Boom! Suddenly, the erupting aura grew stronger by tenfolds. The murderous intent spread over the whole castle, while the massive surge of demonic energy rose a red pillar, lightening the whole sky. Ryuken, who had taken the form of Shuten Doji, blood demon, gave out an order to the terrified soldiers. Prepare for war. A few days later, Ryuken stood atop a hill overlooking his gathered forces, their banners rippling in the cold wind. Soldiers in disciplined lines stretched as far as the eye could see, a testament to the unified nation he had fought so hard to create. Yet, beneath the veneer of order and strength, fear lingered in the hearts of his people. The masses across the country were terrified. The memories of the recent war still haunted them, and now they faced the specter of yet another conflict. Villages trembled at the sight of marching soldiers, their presence a grim reminder of the flames of war that had barely been extinguished. Families whispered in dread as the shadow of a foreign threat loomed large once more. The news had traveled swiftly. The foreigners, who had orchestrated the downfall of their country through manipulation and betrayal, had returned. Their reappearance was a calculated move, coming at a time when the nation's defenses were still recovering. The four daimyos who once wielded divine spirits to protect the land were gone, and with them, a significant portion of the country's military strength. Ryuken's power was immense, but it was not without limits. The enormity of the task ahead weighed heavily on him, and he could feel the collective uncertainty of the land pressing down like a storm. As the soldiers marched through towns and villages, they encountered the wary eyes of the populace. Some cheered weakly, clinging to the hope that Ryuken's leadership would once again deliver them from despair. Others turned away, their faith shaken by the prospect of bloodshed they could already imagine. The situation weighed heavily on Ryuken. Though his declaration of war reverberated across the nation, he was acutely aware of his perilous position. His strength as a wielder of 5 divine spirits and 2 demonic entities was unparalleled, yet even he was bound by human limitations. No matter how powerful, one man could not be everywhere at once. His enemies, the technologically advanced foreigners, had chosen their moment with precision. The mourning period for Kane, a solemn tradition that dictated 14 days of respect for the deceased, was not just a cultural cornerstone, but also a tactical vulnerability. They exploited it, knowing that Ryuken's attention would be divided between grief and strategy. His forces scattered and morale strained. The geography of the land, once an asset, now worked against them. Surrounded by seas on all 4 sides, the country was vulnerable to a coordinated naval assault. Ryuken's father had maintained a delicate balance of power, with the 4 daimyos wielding their divine spirits, each defending their territory with unmatched prowess. That balance shattered after the betrayal of the daimyos and Ryuken's subsequent crusade for vengeance. The unified nation, though strong under his leadership, had lost the strategic advantage of its divine guardians. The foreigners, though lacking divine spirits, had their own formidable edge: magical engineers. These specialists produced tools and machinery that combined technology and magic in devastating ways. Warships armed with enchanted cannons, firearms capable of piercing armor with ease, and siege engines capable of obliterating fortifications from afar gave the invaders a clear upper hand. Their strategy was methodical: encircle the nation, apply pressure on all fronts, and exploit its weakened state. For Ryuken, the challenge was not just to hold the capital but to prevent the 3 other fronts from collapsing. If even one region fell, the invaders could establish a foothold, strangle supply lines, and demoralize the people. Victory on one front would mean little if the rest of the nation was consumed by war. As Kane's funeral pyres burned and the mourning period began, Ryuken stood before his closest allies and generals. Maps of the country's coastline and enemy movements lay spread across the table, illuminated by the flickering light of lanterns. He listened to reports of enemy fleets advancing, their strategies clear yet seemingly unstoppable. "We cannot fight this war as we have fought before," Ryuken said, his voice carrying the weight of his grief and determination. "The balance we once relied on is gone. But this land is not defenseless. It has me, it has you, and it has the will of the people. We must adapt." He outlined a plan that embraced unconventional warfare. While the main forces prepared to defend critical regions, Ryuken called for the organization of guerrilla units, small, highly skilled groups capable of sabotaging enemy supply lines, targeting their magical machinery, and creating chaos within their ranks. Ryuken knew he would have to make impossible choices in the days ahead, deciding where to deploy his forces, when to strike, and when to retreat. His enemies sought to overwhelm him with their numbers and technology, but he would counter them with strategy, by using the mountainous terrain of these coasts. The mourning period for Kane also became a time of quiet preparation. Soldiers drilled tirelessly, smiths forged weapons day and night, and messengers traveled the countryside to rally support. The nation's wounds were still fresh, its strength fragile, but under Ryuken's leadership, it would stand defiant. As the 14th day approached, Ryuken stood alone at Kane's gravesite. His heart was heavy, but his resolve was unshaken. "This land will not fall," he whispered, his voice steady. "Not while I live to defend it." The next day, the invasion began with a ferocity and precision that sent shockwaves through the land. Massive fleets of foreign warships darkened the horizon, their cannons poised to unleash destruction on the coastal settlements. Yet, as the first wave of invaders approached the left coast, they were met with something they hadn't anticipated: Ryuken himself. So he chose the west coast to defend. Means other fronts are just there for the taking. spoke the commander of the fleet from their ships as he saw Ryukin from a binocular. Ryukin stood at the edge of the battlefield, a figure cloaked in an aura of unbridled power and rage. His soldiers, though nervous, awaited his command. They noticed the change in him, the steely detachment in his gaze, the coldness in his voice. Gone was the leader who had once inspired them with his compassion and unyielding hope. Experience more on Empire. This Ryukin exuded only one thing: merciless fury. The invaders launched their assault, their ships firing magical artillery that obliterated parts of the coastline. Yet Ryukin, using the knowledge extracted by his divine spirit, had already anticipated their strategy. He deployed traps along the shore, hidden explosive runes and magical constructs that detonated as the first wave of invaders landed. The coastline erupted in fire and chaos, decimating the enemy's initial ranks. Ryukin himself led the charge, wielding the combined might of his spirits. Divine energy crackled around him, intertwining with the malevolent crimson aura of the demonic spirits. He moved through the battlefield like an unstoppable force, ruthlessly cutting down enemy soldiers. For the first time, his strategy prioritized overwhelming force over precision or care for collateral damage. Entire villages near the coast were evacuated, depending on their strategic value. Crops and supplies were already harvested to deny the enemy any resources. Innocent civilians caught in the crossfire were sent to safety to allow Ryukin act on his singular goal: the total annihilation of the invaders. But due to their haste, thousands of commoners could not escape from the foreign invaders on all four coasts because the latter wanted the resources. The wanton pillage and massacres began, painting the earth red with their blood. His masters and allies, now the new daimyos, confronted him after the first battle. Ryukin-sama began one of his oldest allies, a man who had stood by him through the beginning days of the uprising. This is not the way. You've always fought to protect our people, not to sacrifice their livelihood. They may never be able to return to their homes if we use the villages and towns as a battlefield. What are you doing? He asked with a stern countenance. Ryukin turned to him, his eyes glowing faintly with a sinister red hue. Protection comes at a cost. If sacrifices must be made to ensure our survival, then so be it. But the Ryukin-sama I knew. The ally began, his voice breaking. The Ryukin you knew died with Kane and our child. Ryukin interrupted coldly. What remains is a man who will stop at nothing to destroy those who dare threaten this land. He spoke in a domineering but also contemptuous tone. Unbeknownst to his allies, the Ryukin they were speaking to was no longer fully himself. The demonic spirit, feeding on his grief and rage, had tightened its grip. While the divine spirits still lent their power, they had been silenced, unable to guide him as they once did. Ryukin's decisions, once tempered by wisdom and empathy, now stemmed from a dark and unyielding place. Despite their reservations, his allies had no choice but to follow his orders. The war was escalating rapidly, and Ryukin's strategies, though brutal, were effective. The invaders were pushed back on the left coast, their forces decimated, their supplies cut off. Yet the cost was steep. Villages lay in ruins. All the villages and strongholds were destroyed as both forces used them as means to defend, and fear spread through the population, that they may not have a home left to return. As the soldiers prepared to march to the next front, whispers spread among the ranks and the masses. Was this the man they had followed during the uprising? Or had their leader become something else entirely? For Ryukin, such doubts no longer mattered. His heart, consumed by loss and vengeance, beat only for one purpose: to destroy the foreigners no matter the price. Stay connected with Empire. Any person who lost their loved ones was bound to be emotionally unstable and lose their rationality in the process. And unlike his ancestors, Ryukin had contracted two demonic spirits, one who could control minds while the other one sought pure carnage. And after the death of his wife and child, he had broken down as a man on every level. This led to him becoming a cold and remorseless killer unlike his original personality who valued peace and justice. Blip! The fateful decision was made during a war council in Ryuken's temporary fortress, situated in the Central Plains. His advisors, seasoned generals, new daimyos, and surviving masters gathered around a map illuminated by flickering lanterns. The air was thick with tension, their faces grim from the weight of months of bloodshed. "We've bled too much in these coastal battles," said one of the generals, his voice laced with frustration. "If this continues, we'll lose the very people we're fighting to protect before the foreigners even set foot on our soil." "They're hesitant to engage in a ground war," added another. "But they won't stop until they've taken everything. The sea battles are weakening them too. We need to force them onto our terms." Ryuken, seated at the head of the table, leaned forward. His piercing eyes scanned the map as his fingers drummed on the table. "Then we give them what they want," he said, his voice cold and devoid of hesitation. "We'll let them land." The room erupted in murmurs and protests. "Let them land?" One of his advisors repeated incredulously. "Ryuken-sama, do you realize what you're saying? They'll establish a foothold," spoke Kairaku. "We'll turn that foothold into their grave," Ryuken snapped, silencing the room. "We've been fighting them on their terms for too long. Their ships, their artillery, it's all designed to dominate at sea. But on land, they'll be vulnerable, especially on the eastern plains." He proposed a battle strategy. The eastern coast was a vast stretch of flat, open terrain. It was strategically risky, offering no natural defenses. But it also allowed Ryuken to dictate the battlefield, leveraging his knowledge of the land and the remaining divine spirits to outmaneuver the enemy. One of the daimyos, a former ally of Ryuken's father, hesitated before speaking. "And what of the people living in the eastern regions? If we allow them to land, villages and towns will become collateral. There already isn't enough time to evacuate masses in such short time," spoke Tadayori Shuhei, one of the daimos. Ryuken's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. "Evacuate them even if they have to leave all their rations and belongings behind. Move every civilian to the interior regions. This war has already cost us too much. I won't allow it to drag on any longer." His words carried a chilling finality. The demonic spirit's influence had dulled the compassion that once defined his leadership. His allies exchanged uneasy glances but knew they had no alternative. The war had to end one way or another. Preparations began immediately. Civilians were uprooted from their homes, their lives disrupted once again as they were herded toward safer regions. The eastern plains were cleared of any resources that could aid the enemy. Traps were laid, concealed pits, magical barriers, and explosive runes designed to cripple the invaders as they advanced. Ryuken's forces, though battered and weary, steeled themselves for the decisive confrontation. Messages were sent across the land, calling upon every able-bodied fighter to join the ranks. Samurai, a shigeru, and even peasants willing to wield a spear were mustered. Despite the dwindling numbers, Ryuken stood as an unshakable figure of determination. He spent hours honing his strategies, studying every possible outcome. The divine spirits remained silent, their presence a distant echo. Only the demonic spirit whispered in his ear, feeding his resolve with promises of victory through unrelenting power. When the foreign fleet finally appeared on the horizon of the eastern coast, the soldiers of the land stood ready. Rows upon rows of warriors lined the plains, their armor gleaming under the rising sun. The invaders began their landing, their massive war machines and troops pouring onto the shore like a relentless tide. The battle on the eastern plains erupted like a storm. Ryuken's forces clashed with the invaders in a cacophony of steel, magic, and screams. The foreigners' war machines unleashed torrents of destruction, while Ryuken's troops fought valiantly, their morale bolstered by his presence on the front lines. The ground shook with the impact of cannons, and the air sizzled with the energies of magical artillery. Ryuken himself was a whirlwind of power. His blade danced through the battlefield, guided by the divine spirits, while the demonic spirits fueled his relentless ferocity. He cut down dozens of enemy soldiers with his elemental attacks, his aura a terrifying beacon for both friend and foe. However, the foreign invaders had prepared for him. A group of enemy mages, hidden behind their front lines, activated a massive magic formation. The ground beneath Ryukin glowed with intricate runes, and chains of pure energy erupted around him, ensnaring his body within a barrier. "What is this?" Ryukin roared, struggling against the bindings. His divine and demonic auras flared, but the formation siphoned his energy, rendering his powers unstable. The demonic spirit, which had gripped Ryukin's soul for so long, shrieked in anger. Its influence wavered, and for the first time in months, Ryukin's mind began to clear. The whispers of rage and vengeance faded, replaced by silence. And then came clarity. Ryukin's vision blurred as memories surged through his mind. His father's proud smile as he taught him the ways of a just ruler, Kane's gentle laughter as they spoke of their unborn child. The magic formation crackled, threatening to shatter under the sheer force of his emotions. The divine spirits, sensing his newfound clarity, spoke to him for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "Ryukin, there is still a way to end this war once and for all. Unlike your father, you have all of us. If you want to win this war, you must become the sacred divinity. But no, the price will be your life," spoke Toranaga in Ryukin's mind. Ryukin closed his eyes, a serene determination washing over him. "If that's the cost to save my homeland and people, then I die 1,000 times." Given the gravity of the situation, Ryukin carefully considered the divine spirit's suggestion to transform into the sacred divinity, a decision that would undoubtedly end his life. The spirit's proposal was not made lightly. It was rooted in their intrinsic bond to the land they had sworn to protect. Thousands of years ago, the gods of these lands had devised the pact between the divine spirits and the shogun's bloodline. This arrangement was a safeguard, a divine intervention meant to ensure the security and prosperity of the homeland. The spirits were not mere entities of power. They were guardians, deeply intertwined with the fate of the nation for thousands of years. Now, as the enemy closed in and the specter of annihilation loomed over the horizon, the necessity of the ultimate sacrifice became clear. Ryukin's life was not just his own. It was the linchpin of his country's survival. If he fell in this final stand, it would be to protect everything he held dear. The weight of this decision settled over Ryukin like a shroud, yet he faced it with unwavering determination. His resolve was unbreakable, his sense of duty overpowering the instinct for self-preservation. He knew that the path ahead was fraught with pain and loss, but it was a path he would walk without hesitation. "If my death can be the salvation of our people and our land," Ryukin declared, "then I will embrace it without fear." The divine spirits, bolstered by Ryukin's indomitable spirit, found their confidence strengthened. His resolve mirrored their ancient purpose, and together, they would fulfill the covenant forged long ago. In that moment of unity, the line between human and divine blurred, as both prepared to enact the ultimate defense for their homeland. Boom! Ryukin's weakened aura suddenly erupted as he turned into a 400-meter-tall, 8-armed titan with a demonic mask. He drew upon the power of all 5 divine spirits with a deafening cry. Their energies merged into a blinding radiance, shattering the magic formation and scattering the enemy mages like leaves in a storm. Ryukin's body transformed, his armor replaced by a glowing, ethereal form of pure fire. Each arm carried a different elemental katana while fire and blood merged together to create a protective armor around his ginormous figure. Roar! The battlefield fell silent as both sides stopped to witness the spectacle. Ryukin, now the sacred divinity, rose into the air, his presence overwhelming. He extended his hand, targeting one of the katanas made of light element, and the very next second beams of light rained down upon the enemy forces. Bang! Shatter! Crumble! The foreigners' war machines were obliterated in an instant, their soldiers incinerated by the holy power. The tide of the battle turned decisively as Ryukin unleashed a final, devastating surge of energy that engulfed the entire invading army. 1 hour later, when the light faded, The plains were eerily quiet. The enemy forces were no more. Their fleet and troops were annihilated. Ryukin descended, his divine form flickering. His soldiers cheered, but their joy turned to sorrow as they saw their leader collapse to his knees. 2 days later, Ryukin lay on his deathbed in the capital. The room was filled with his closest allies, now daimyos, and the few surviving soldiers who had fought by his side. His body was frail, his once mighty aura reduced to a faint glow. All of his allies were gathered in his room, knowing that any moment they shared with their shogun could be the last. Tadayori Shuhei, one of Ryukin's masters who was also one of the daimyos, knelt beside him, tears streaming down his face. Ryukin-sama, your sacrifice saved us all. You've given this land a future. He spoke with a heavy tone. I have seen you grow since you were born. I have been there with you since that dreadful night. I never wanted this kind of pain and misery for you. I swore to your father that I would protect you. Yet here I am, watching that very child on his deathbed. Spoke the tall old samurai as tears welled up in his eyes. Ryukin weakly smiled. Don't be depressed, sensei. Even my father would agree that you've done more than what was expected of you. My current state is of my choice. You should not blame yourself for it. He spoke in a weak tone. A future built on too much bloodshed will never carry hope to the next generation. Promise me, all of you, promise me you'll build a land of peace. A land even my child would have been proud of if he were alive. He said in an exhausted tone as his stature revealed the tremendous toll on his body. As his life force ebbed away, Ryukin looked out the window at the setting sun. Ryukin's voice, though weak, carried the weight of his will and the dreams he once shared with Kane. As he lay on his deathbed, surrounded by his allies, he looked into their eyes with a solemn determination. Listen to me, he began, his voice faltering but firm. The time of kings and emperors must end. I've seen the pain of tyranny, of greed, of power concentrated in the hands of a few. This war was born from those failures. No more. The daimyos and generals, who had pledged their loyalty to him, exchanged uneasy glances. Ryukin continued, his gaze unwavering. From this day forward, this country shall no longer bow to monarchs or shoguns. The people must choose their leaders. A democracy, where every voice is heard, where no child suffers under the weight of another's ambition. That is my final wish, he stated. One of the daimyos hesitated, then knelt beside him. Ryukin-sama, your vision is noble, but such a transition will not be easy. It may take years, even decades, for the people to embrace this change. Ryukin managed a faint smile. It will be hard, but the best paths often are. Promise me you'll see it through. One by one, his allies swore their oaths, tears in their eyes. They knew the weight of his words and the cost of his sacrifice. I have one last announcement to make, to the people of this land. So spread my edict to the masses. He spoke with a resolute tone. The edict of the last shogun.